Hey friends, it's your girl Mia. This is Mia Horror Stories. And tonight's story, the babysitting job paid triple. But the bedtime rules had my photo attached, is told in darkness. The screen will stay black, so you can simply listen, imagine, and feel every moment without distraction. Trust me, the build-up matters, and the ending is where the real chill hides. So don't look away, and don't leave early. The first strange thing was that the photograph had been taken that afternoon. I knew because I was wearing the green raincoat I had bought 2 hours earlier at the Target in Watertown. And because the picture showed me standing outside my apartment building, with the receipt still looped around my left wrist. I had not noticed anyone taking it. The angle was high and slightly tilted, as though the photographer had been leaning over a second-floor windowsill across the street. Someone had printed the image on ordinary copy paper, cut around my body with scissors, and stapled it to the bottom of a laminated sheet titled Bedtime Rules for ELLIOT. At first, I thought it was a joke. Not a funny one exactly, but the kind of elaborate, awkward joke wealthy people sometimes make when they are trying to show that they are relaxed around hired help. I stood in the Rowans' kitchen with one hand resting on the granite island, waiting for either parent to grin. Neither of them did. My name is Mara Ellis, a 24-year-old woman, and at that point in my life, I was taking any job that paid quickly and did not require a credit check. I had dropped out of a graduate speech pathology program at Boston University 6 months earlier, after my father's stroke turned every phone call from home into a new expense. I told people I was taking a semester off. That sounded temporary, responsible, even. The truth was that I had stopped opening emails from the university because each one made my chest tighten. The babysitting job had come through an app called Nestle, which was mostly used by families around Boston and Cambridge. The Rowans were offering $90 an hour from 6 in the evening until 1 in the morning. Triple my usual rate. 7 hours would cover most of the overdue minimum payment on my father's rehabilitation bill. That was why I had taken the red line to Harvard Square, transferred to bus, and walked the last half mile through cold November rain to a narrow brick house in Belmont, where the porch lights were already glowing at 5:30. That was also why I did not immediately leave when I saw my own picture stapled to the rules. "Is this supposed to be me?" I asked. The kitchen smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and toasted bread. Somewhere behind the walls, an old radiator made a ticking noise as it heated. Rain tapped against the black windows above the sink. Claire Rowan, a 38-year-old woman, stood beside the refrigerator, fastening a gold earring. She was thin, fair-haired, and dressed in a dark blue jumpsuit that looked expensive without having any obvious label. When I pointed at the photograph, her fingers stopped. "Oh," she said. That single word bothered me more than laughter would have. Daniel Rowan, a 41-year-old man, was kneeling near the back door, struggling to tie one polished shoe while reading something on his phone. He looked up at Claire. "You said you replaced that." "I thought I did." "Replaced what?" I asked. Claire came toward the island and lifted the laminated sheet. The The photograph swung from the staple. "It's Elliot's doing," she said. "He gets fixated on new babysitters." "He took that picture." "No, of course not." Her answer came too fast. Daniel stood, smoothing the front of his charcoal suit. "It's probably from the app. The app doesn't have this picture." Nestle used a headshot I had taken against my bedroom wall. In that photograph, my hair was longer, and I wore a white blouse. The image stapled to the rules showed wet pavement behind me, and the orange and red Target sign reflected in a parked car. Daniel stepped closer, studying it as though he had never seen it before. "That is odd," he said. Claire removed the staple with her thumbnail. It took effort. The metal dragged against the plastic with a high little squeak that made me clench my teeth. "There," she said, folding the photograph twice and putting it in the pocket of her jumpsuit. "Elliot likes making things feel dramatic. He's at that age." "What age is that?" 9. From the hallway behind us came the soft click of a floorboard. A boy stood in the doorway. Elliot Rowan, a 9-year-old boy, was small for his age, with straight brown hair cut neatly above his eyebrows. He wore gray pajama bottoms and a long-sleeved t-shirt printed with planets. His feet were bare. He looked at me, then at his mother's pocket. "You weren't supposed to take it off," he said. Claire's expression changed, not into anger, but into the careful blankness adults use when a child says something embarrassing in front of company. "Elliot, say hello to Mara." He kept watching the pocket. "Hello, Mara. Hi, you look different inside." Daniel gave a short laugh. "He means without the raincoat." Elliot shook his head. The radiator clicked again, 3 taps, a pause, then 2 more. Claire touched her son's shoulder and guided him toward the kitchen island. "Mara is going to stay with you while Dad and I attend a charity dinner. You have her number on the emergency list. She has ours." "I know. And you'll follow the usual schedule." "I always do." "That is objectively not true," Daniel said, smiling at me. For several minutes, everything became normal enough that I felt foolish for being unsettled. Claire showed me the refrigerator drawers, the induction stove, the cabinet where they kept children's medicine. Daniel demonstrated the security system mounted near the back door. The house had 6 exterior cameras, motion sensors on the ground floor windows, and electronic locks that could be controlled through an app. "We've had package theft," he explained. "Nothing serious." He gave me a temporary access code, 1908, and watched me enter it twice. The system announced itself in a woman's synthetic voice. "Alarm disarmed." Elliot flinched at the sound. I noticed because I had spent 2 years learning to notice involuntary reactions in children. Shoulders rising, jaw tightening, eyes shifting toward an exit. Old habits from the speech clinic. Elliot's gaze moved not toward the front door, but toward the basement door beside the pantry. It was painted the same white as the wall and fitted with a brass slide bolt at adult shoulder height. Claire followed my attention. "Laundry and utilities," she said. "You won't need to go down there." "Okay." "The door sticks when the weather changes," Daniel added. "So don't force it." "I won't." He smiled, but his eyes remained on the bolt. My private flaw, though I would not have called it that then, was that I hated being thought difficult. I could refuse a dangerous request if someone shouted it at me. I could hang up on a scammer, report harassment, step between strangers arguing on a train. But when polite people softened their voices and implied I was overreacting, I usually went along. It came from my mother, probably. She used to apologize to waiters when they brought her the wrong meal. She once thanked a dentist for cracking one of her crowns, so I nodded through the tour. The Rowans' house was long and narrow, with dark wooden floors and framed black and white family photographs arranged along the staircase. Elliot's bedroom occupied the second floor at the back. Across from it was a guest room, then a locked home office. The third floor belonged to the parents. Claire paused outside the guest room. You can sit in there after Elliot goes to sleep. There's a television. What about downstairs? The Wi-Fi is better up here. That was not an answer, but Daniel was already calling from below that their car had arrived. Claire handed me the laminated bedtime rules. Without my photograph, the bottom edge looked strangely empty. Most of the instructions were ordinary. 7:00 dinner, 7:30 shower, 8:00 reading in bedroom, 8:30 lights out. Below that, in smaller print, were several household notes. Keep the hallway lights switched on. Do not allow Elliot to use the parents' phone charger. If the security system says a window is open, check the app before checking the window. Elliot may ask you to move furniture. Do not help him. The last instruction had been underlined in black marker. After 9:00 p.m., do not answer questions about previous babysitters. I read that one twice. Claire saw me looking. He had a sitter who told him ghost stories, she said. It caused months of sleep issues. Her name was Becca, Elliot said from his doorway. Claire turned sharply. Shoes, coat, goodbye hug. Now, I don't need shoes. You're coming downstairs. Elliot looked at me again. There was no childish grin on his face, no pleasure in making his mother uncomfortable. Becca answered the questions, he said. Daniel climbed halfway up the stairs. Buddy, Elliot disappeared into his bedroom. The Rowans left at 6:12. Claire hugged her son in the entryway. Daniel reminded him not to touch the security panel. They both told me the dinner was at the Boston Harbor Hotel and that they could return within 40 minutes if needed, though Belmont to Rose Wharf in Friday traffic would take longer than that. At the front door, Claire pressed a folded stack of cash into my hand. Half now, she said, half when we get home. There were $300 bills. You said 90 an hour. I know. Consider the extra a last-minute inconvenience fee. What inconvenience? For a second, only the rain answered, pattering against the porch roof. The weather, she said. Their black Volvo pulled away, tires hissing on the wet road. I locked the door and watched the taillights vanish behind bare maple branches. Elliot stood beside me. My parents don't pay extra for weather, he said. Maybe they're trying to be nice. They're trying to make sure you stay. I looked down at him. That sounds like one of those dramatic things your mother mentioned. He considered that. She says that when she doesn't want to explain something. The house settled around us. Water moved through the radiator pipes with a faint rushing sound. From somewhere outside came the reversing beep of a delivery truck, muted by rain and double-paned glass. I put the cash in my bag. Dinner, I said. What are we having? Elliot ate 2 slices of cheese pizza at the kitchen island while I reheated soup for myself. He told me about his science class, a disagreement over whether Pluto should count as a planet, and a boy named Lucas who cheated at Foursquare. His voice became more animated when the conversation moved away from the house. For 20 minutes, he was simply 9. Then the security panel chimed. Not the alarm, just a clean electronic note. The synthetic voice said, "Basement door open." Elliot stopped chewing. The brass bolt was still in place. I could see it from the kitchen island, slid firmly into its bracket. I took out my phone and opened the temporary link Daniel had sent me. The security dashboard showed green icons for the front door, back door, and every window. The basement sensor glowed red. "Probably the door sticking," I said. Elliot set his pizza down. "The door doesn't stick. Your dad said it does." My dad lies when he's scared. Children say things like that. They repeat arguments without understanding them. They assign fear to adult irritation and secrecy to ordinary rules. That was what I told myself. I checked the time. 6:47 p.m. The bedtime sheet said dinner until 7. Shower at 7:30. Reading at 8. We had hours before the instruction about previous babysitters applied. The panel chimed again. Basement door closed. The bolt had not moved. I walked over and tested the knob without touching the slide bolt. The door shifted slightly in its frame, less than a quarter inch, producing a soft wooden knock. Loose sensor, swollen door. Old house, explainable. Behind me, Elliot whispered, "You shouldn't let it know you checked." I turned. "What does that mean?" His eyes went to the laminated sheet lying on the island. "You can ask me now," he said. "It isn't 9 yet." "Ask you what?" "What happened to Becca?" The rain strengthened, drumming against the windows hard enough to blur the lights of the neighboring houses. My phone vibrated in my hand. A notification from the security app appeared. New camera clip available, side entrance. I tapped it. The video showed the narrow passage along the Rowan's house, time-stamped 30 seconds earlier. Rain streaked diagonally across the lens. Trash bins stood beneath the kitchen window. Nothing moved for the first 5 seconds. Then, a person in a green raincoat crossed the far edge of the frame. My green raincoat was hanging on the hook beside the front door. I looked toward it. Still there. The clip ended before the person's face came into view. "Mara," Elliot said quietly. "I should have called his parents immediately. I should have taken him out the front door, walked to the nearest occupied house, and explained that the security system might have been compromised. Instead, I replayed the clip. Once, then again. The figure was approximately my height. Same coat color, same dark jeans, but the gait was wrong. The person moved stiffly, one arm held close against the body. A disguise, perhaps. Someone testing the cameras. A relative who owned the same coat. Compression artifacts turning blue fabric green. There were explanations, not good ones, but enough to keep me standing there. Elliot picked up the bedtime sheet and turned it over. On the back, drawn in pencil, was a rough map of the second floor. His bedroom, the guest room, the stairs. A dark square had been shaded inside the wall between his closet and the locked office. "That isn't part of the rules," I said. I drew it. "What is it?" the place Becca put her phone. Why? So it could record after she left. The security panel chimed for a third time. Side entrance open. There was no side entrance on the tour. I looked at the app. A new red icon had appeared beneath the basement sensor, one I had not seen before. Service door open. Where is the service door? I asked. Elliot pointed upstairs, not toward the front of the house, toward his bedroom. My thumb hovered over Claire's number. One tap would call her. Another would call 911. I still had the chance to treat this as a malfunction, to follow the parents' instructions, to avoid embarrassing myself over an old house and a child's story. Or I could ask Elliot what happened to the previous babysitter while, according to the rules, I was still allowed to hear the answer. The hallway light flickered once. Elliot waited. I had to choose. I called Claire instead of calling 911. That choice bothered me later, but in the moment it felt reasonable. Responsible, even. This was her house, her security system, her son. Calling the police before calling her would have meant admitting that I had lost control of the situation less than an hour after she left. It would also have meant becoming difficult. Claire answered on the fourth ring. Music and voices pressed together behind her. The bright restaurant noise of glasses touching and people laughing too loudly. "Mara," she said. "Is Elliot okay?" "He's fine, I think. The security app says a service door is open." There was a pause, not confusion, calculation. "Where are you?" "In the kitchen." "Is Elliot with you?" "Yes." Claire lowered her voice. "Put me on speaker." I did. Elliot stood on the opposite side of the island, holding the laminated rules against his chest. His abandoned pizza had gone shiny with grease. "You're on speaker," I said. "Elliot," Claire said, "did you touch the office door?" "No." "You move your bookcase?" "No." Her second question caught me. I looked at the rule sheet. "Elliot may ask you to move furniture. Do not help him." "Why would he move his bookcase?" I asked. Claire ignored me. "Elliot, I need you to go upstairs and wait in your room." He shook his head even though she could not see him. "No, your mother asked you to do something," Daniel said through the phone. He sounded farther away, as though Claire had turned toward him. "Go upstairs, buddy. The service door is open." "We know. You said it was sealed." Claire's breathing reached the microphone in one soft rush. "Mara, take the phone off speaker." I picked it up. Elliot watched me do it. "What is a service door?" I asked. "It's an old access panel," Claire said. "This house was renovated in stages. There are unused spaces behind some of the walls. Elliot says it's in his room. It isn't a door in the normal sense, more like a maintenance hatch." "Why does it have a security sensor?" Daniel said something near her, too muffled to understand. Claire answered him sharply. "I am handling it." Then she spoke to me in a slower voice. "The system has been glitching since an electrician worked here last month. We should have warned you. You didn't mention an electrician." I didn't think it mattered. "What about the camera clip?" "What clip?" "Someone walked past the side of the house wearing a coat like mine." Another pause. The restaurant sounds behind her changed. A door shut, cutting off the music. She had moved somewhere private. "Send it to me." I forwarded the clip. While we waited, the synthetic voice from the panel said, "Service door closed." Elliot pressed his lips together. My phone buzzed. Claire had watched the video. "That's probably a pedestrian on Waverly Street," she said. The camera points down the side of your house. The alley connects to the sidewalk. No, it doesn't. There's a fence. I had noticed the fence when I arrived, black metal with pointed tops, running from the house to the neighbor's hedge. The side passage was enclosed. Claire gave a small, impatient exhale. Then it could be Daniel's brother. He occasionally checks the property. Daniel spoke more clearly now. My brother is in Providence, Claire said. I thought he was back. He's not. Neither of them addressed the fact that the person had been dressed like me. I walked to the front hall and checked through the narrow window beside the door. Rain coursed down the glass, turning the porch and street into smeared blocks of amber light. No one stood outside. My green raincoat still hung from its hook, dripping onto the tile. Come home, I said. The words left my mouth before I could soften them. Claire did not respond immediately. For the first time, I heard how I sounded, not apologetic, not reassuring, not eager to prove I could handle it, just firm. We're leaving now, Daniel said. Claire said, it will take us at least 45 minutes. You said 40 before, I replied, in normal traffic. What should I do until then? Follow the rules. The call ended. I stared at the screen. Elliot had come into the front hall without making a sound. They aren't coming, he said. They said they are. They say that first. First before what? Before they call back and say the car won't start. That's oddly specific. It happened with Becca. I crouched so we were closer to eye level. Elliot, I need you to stop giving me pieces. If there's something dangerous in this house, tell me plainly. His face tightened. I don't know what's dangerous. What happened to Becca? She went into the wall. A heavy knock came from upstairs, not the front door, not a pipe. Wood struck wood once, directly above us. Elliot's eyes lifted toward the ceiling. I stood. Is anyone else supposed to be here? No. Cleaning staff, family, a contractor. No. Could someone have stayed upstairs when your parents left? He rubbed the edge of the laminated sheet with his thumb. My dad checks the rooms. That isn't what I asked. He looked toward the staircase. I don't know. The smart lock clicked behind me. A small green light on the keypad turned red. I grabbed the front door handle and pulled. The door did not open. I entered 1908 on the keypad. It gave a low error tone. Code rejected, the security system announced. I tried again. Code rejected. My phone vibrated with an app notification. Temporary access revoked by administrator. I called Claire back. Straight to voicemail. Daniel's number did the same. That was the point when the situation stopped being a strange babysitting job and became a practical emergency. Someone with administrator access had locked us inside. It might have been an accidental automation. Claire could have pressed the wrong control while putting her phone away. Daniel might have revoked the temporary code after assuming we had left. Smart home systems failed in stupid ways all the time, but the timing mattered. The upstairs knock, the service door alert, then the lock. I dialed 911. The call began ringing. A sound came from upstairs. 3 short electronic beeps. Elliot whispered, "That's Becca's phone." The dispatcher answered, 911. "What is the address of your emergency?" I gave the address from the Nestle booking. My voice shook on the house number, so I repeated it. "What is happening there?" "I'm babysitting. The owners left. Their security system locked us inside and I think someone may be in the house. Do you see or hear an intruder? I heard a noise upstairs. A camera recorded someone outside in a closed side yard. There are door sensors opening that I wasn't told about. The dispatcher's voice remained level. Are you and the child in a secure room? No. Do not search the house. Take the child into a room with a locking door. Stay on the line. The kitchen had no lock. The first floor powder room did, but it had one small window and barely enough space for 2 people. The guest room upstairs had a lock, according to Claire, but going there meant moving toward the noise. The front door is electronically locked, I said. Can I break a window? Do not do that unless you need immediate escape. Officers are being dispatched. Is there another exterior door? The back door. I took Elliot's hand and moved quickly through the kitchen. The back door was a modern glass panel set in a thick frame. A mechanical thumb turn sat beneath the electronic lock. I twisted it. It moved halfway and stopped. I pulled harder. Nothing. Is there a deadbolt? The dispatcher asked. Yes, it's jammed. Do you see anyone outside? Beyond the wet glass was a small patio, a grill under a black cover, and a wooden gate. The motion light was off. No. Behind us, the security panel chimed. Second floor office, window open. Rain rattled against the kitchen panes. The locked office was across from Elliot's room. I moved us into the powder room and turned the lock. The room smelled of hand soap and the artificial cinnamon sticks arranged in a ceramic cup. I closed the toilet lid and sat Elliot on it. Officers are approximately 8 minutes away, the dispatcher said. Stay where you are. Keep quiet. Tell me if you hear anyone approaching. 8 minutes. A normal amount of time. A short amount of time. Inside the powder room, it stretched. Water ticked through the pipes behind the wall. Elliot breathed through his mouth. My phone screen illuminated the pale wallpaper, patterned with tiny blue branches. Then the Wi-Fi icon disappeared. The call remained connected over cellular. A notification appeared before the security app went offline. Smoke detected, second floor hallway. Do you smell smoke? The dispatcher asked when I told her. I inhaled. Cinnamon. Soap. Damp wool from Elliot's sleeve. Then something sharper slipped underneath it. Hot plastic. Yes. The detector upstairs began sounding. 3 piercing beeps, a pause, then 3 more. The house alarm followed, louder, filling the first floor with a pulsing electronic horn. Elliot covered his ears. We have to get out, I told the dispatcher. Can you access a ground floor window? The powder room window was narrow and fixed shut. Kitchen windows opened above the counters, but they were high and fitted with interior sensors. The living room had larger sash windows facing the street. I unlocked the bathroom door. The hallway looked empty. Stay behind me, I told Elliot. Smoke was not yet visible downstairs, but the burnt plastic smell had thickened. The alarm made it hard to think. Each blast seemed to strike behind my eyes. We moved toward the living room. Halfway there, the lights went out. The security alarm stopped instantly. The sudden absence of it left a high ringing in my ears. Emergency lights clicked on near the stairs, casting a dim yellow strip along the floor. The dispatcher was still speaking, but her words broke apart as my signal dropped. Stay near, units do not. The call disconnected. I tried again. No service. That always happens, Elliot said. What does? When the alarm goes off. I grabbed a brass fireplace tool from its stand. It was heavier than I expected, a solid poker with a hooked end. The living room window had 2 latches. I opened them and pulled the lower sash. It did not move, painted shut. I struck the glass with the poker. The first hit bounced and jarred my wrist. The second made a white star in the pane. The third broke it. Glass collapsed outward onto the wet shrubs. Cold air pushed in, carrying rain and the smell of soil. Back up, I said. I used the poker to knock loose the remaining shards along the frame. My hands were shaking badly now. Cut the side of my right palm on a jagged edge before I felt it happen. Warm blood ran across my wrist. The opening was wide enough for Elliot. I lifted him by the waist. Climb through, stay low, go to the sidewalk and yell for help. He put one knee on the sill, then stopped. A flashlight moved outside. A narrow white beam passed between the shrubs. Someone was standing in the front yard. Police, I called. The light snapped off. No answer. A moment later, the broken window began lowering from above. The upper sash, controlled by nothing electronic that I could see, slid downward under its own weight. The old counterbalance had failed. It dropped hard, trapping the bottom of Elliot's pajama shirt against the frame and striking his shoulder. He cried out. I caught the sash before it crushed his fingers and shoved upward. Pain tore through my cut palm. Pull back, I said. His shirt ripped. He fell into me, and we went down together on the wooden floor. Outside, footsteps ran along the side of the house. Fast, heavy, toward the back. The smoke alarm upstairs continued beeping on its internal battery. I helped Elliot stand. His left shoulder sagged slightly, and he held his arm against his ribs. Can you move your fingers? He did. Does your neck hurt? No. Your head? No. The back door glass shattered. One impact, then another. Not breaking inward yet, but close. We could not remain on the ground floor. The front window was compromised. Someone was circling the house. The back door might fail within seconds. The smoke was coming from upstairs, but so was the guest room with a lock, and the hidden space where Becca's phone was supposedly still beeping. I hated the choice immediately. Stay downstairs near an intruder or go upstairs toward a possible fire. Elliot clutched my sleeve with his good hand. There's another way out, he said. Where? Through my closet. I stared at him. The place on your map, he nodded. You said it was in the wall. It goes to the office. The office window opens onto the porch roof. The back door glass cracked in a branching line. A shadow moved across the frosted pane. Can you open the passage? I asked. Not by myself. Why not? The bookcase is in front of it. The rule returned to me. Elliot may ask you to move furniture. Do not help him. Another strike hit the back door. A small section of glass fell inward and scattered across the kitchen tile. A gloved hand reached through. I took Elliot by the uninjured arm, and we ran upstairs. The second floor smelled stronger than the first, not like a room fully burning, more like a wire trapped under insulation, hot enough to soften its coating. The odor gathered at the back of my throat and stayed there. Elliot's room was the last door on the left at the end of the hallway. The guest room stood directly across from it. Office was beside the guest room, closer to the stairs, its door shut, and its brass knob catching the weak emergency light. Behind us, downstairs, glass continued falling. Small pieces at first, then a larger collapse. The back door had given way. "Inside," I said. Elliot pushed open his bedroom door with his good hand. The room was narrow and deeper than it looked from the hall, with a twin bed against the right wall, a desk under the rear window, and a tall bookcase wedged beside the closet on the left. The shelves were packed with hardback science books, board games, model rockets, and plastic bins full of building pieces. I locked the bedroom door. The lock was a simple push button in the knob. It would slow someone down. That was all. "Help me with the bookcase," I said. Elliot looked at the laminated rule sheet still clutched in his hand. In the run upstairs, it had bent down the middle. My mom said, "I know what she said. She gets angry when people move it. Someone is coming into the house." She got angry at Becca too. I hooked my fingers around the side of the bookcase and pulled. Nothing happened. It was heavier than it should have been, even loaded. I crouched and looked along the base. 2 metal brackets connected it to the wall near the floor. Of course they did. Furniture in a child's room was supposed to be anchored. "Do you have tools?" I asked. "In the desk." I opened the top drawer. Pencils, tape, an old handheld game, a pair of blunt scissors. The second drawer contained batteries, charging cables, a small flashlight, and a red plastic screwdriver set designed for children. I grabbed the largest Phillips head. The screws holding the brackets were real steel and set deep. The plastic handle flexed in my bloody hand. I tried anyway. The screwdriver slipped twice. On the third attempt, the point caught. I turned with both hands, biting down as pain pulsed through my palm. The screw moved perhaps 1 millimeter. Downstairs, a floorboard creaked. Another. Someone had entered the kitchen. Elliot stood near the door, head tilted. "Can you hear them?" I whispered. He nodded. A cabinet opened below us. There was a clink of glass, followed by something rolling across the kitchen tile. Whoever had entered was not rushing. That was worse. They were moving through the house as though they knew its layout and believed we had nowhere to go. I twisted harder. The plastic screwdriver handle split down one side. "Damn it." "You said a bad word," Elliot whispered. "Yes, you're allowed." It would have almost been funny under different circumstances. I abandoned the lower screw and tested the bookcase again. The brackets held. The furniture shifted only enough to scrape the floor. My phone still had no signal, but I opened the camera app and switched on its light. The beam showed pale smoke collecting along the ceiling near the closet. The source was close. I touched the wall behind the bookcase. Warm, not burning, not yet. "Where exactly is the opening?" I asked. "In the back panel." "The back of the bookcase," he nodded. "Then even if we move this, we still have to break through it." "It opens." "How?" "There's a latch." From this side, he hesitated. "Becca used a knife." I stared at him. "You watched her." I helped. The private fear beneath my irritation was becoming harder to ignore. I had spent months telling myself I could manage my family's problems if I stayed calm and agreeable, that money and paperwork and bad news could be contained through patience. But the moment I needed to take control, truly take it, my body kept waiting for permission. There was no one left to give it. I crossed to the bedroom door and pressed my ear against the wood. A sound came from the hallway, dragging, slow, uneven, approaching from the staircase. I tightened my grip on the fireplace poker. The door handle moved. Elliot made a small noise behind me. The knob turned halfway, stopped against the lock, then returned. A soft knock followed. 3 taps. "Mara," Claire called from the hall. For one wild second, relief made my knees weak. I reached for the lock, then stopped. Claire's voice came again. "Mara, open the door, it's me." The words were clear but strangely flat. I looked at Elliot. He was shaking his head. "That's not her," he mouthed. The figure outside knocked again. "Mara, the police are here." I stepped back from the door. My scalp prickled from the heat and smoke, but there was nothing supernatural about a voice behind a door. A recording. A phone. Someone imitating Claire after hearing her speak. Or Claire herself, returned without warning. "Say something only you would know," I called. Silence. Then the voice answered, "Your father is in rehabilitation." That fact had been in my Nestle profile under emergency financial need, written during an application process I barely remembered completing. It proved nothing. The door shook as someone leaned against it. "Open the door," Claire's voice said. Elliot whispered, "Her car isn't here." "How do you know?" The driveway camera would chime. The handle turned again, harder. The door bowed inward slightly near the lock. I raised the poker. The voice outside changed. Not much, just enough. The next sentence came lower, rougher, unmistakably male. "You need to leave the boy." Elliot stepped backward until his calves hit the bed. The misdirection fell apart all at once. The voice had come from a phone held near the door, probably playing pieces of Claire's speech captured from a voicemail or home recording. The sound was too clean at first, too detached from breathing. A shoe struck the door. The frame cracked near the latch. "Window," I said. The rear window faced the backyard and the sloping roof above the kitchen extension. If we could get onto it, we might reach the wooden fence or drop to the patio. I shoved the desk aside enough to reach the sash. It opened 3 inches, then stopped. A steel pin had been inserted through the upper frame. Not a sensor. A physical stop. I yanked it. It did not move. "Do you have pliers?" Elliot pointed to the closet. "Of course." Behind the bookcase. The bedroom door took another hit. The latch screws tore partly out of the frame. I smashed the corner of the window with the poker. The glass cracked, but did not collapse. Double-paned safety glass. The outer layer fractured into a spider web, while the inner layer held. I struck again. The impact vibrated through my injured hand and up to my elbow. Blood dotted the desk. The inner pane finally broke inward, scattering small cubes of glass across the carpet. Cold rain sprayed through the opening. I knocked out enough glass to look down. The kitchen roof began about 4 feet below the window. Wet black shingles sloped toward a gutter above the patio. Beyond it lay the backyard, enclosed by a 6-foot cedar fence. The back gate was near the left corner, perhaps 20 feet from the house. A possible escape. Then a flashlight beam swept across the yard. Another person stood by the gate, not the intruder in the hallway. This figure wore a dark hood and held something long at waist level. For a moment, I thought it was a rifle. My stomach contracted. The figure raised it, and a bright white beam struck the side of the house. Not a weapon. A police flashlight attached to a collapsible baton or held beside one. "Police," a man shouted. "Belmont Police. Is anyone inside?" I leaned toward the broken window. "Up here." The bedroom door slammed inward another inch. The officer's light found my face. "Stay where you are," he shouted. "We're entering. Someone is upstairs." The officer turned toward the back door and spoke into his radio. Behind me, the person in the hallway stopped hitting the door. Footsteps ran away, toward the stairs. A second later, a heavy crash sounded from below, followed by a shout. "Police, show me your hands." Then running. Fast. A door slammed. The officer outside moved out of sight. Elliot came beside me, cradling his shoulder. They found him. Maybe. The smoke was thicker now, visible in gray layers near the ceiling. I returned to the hall door and listened. Shouting came from downstairs, but the words overlapped. A radio crackled. Someone yelled that the rear was unsecured. Then 2 sharp bangs sounded from below. Not gunshots, too hollow, a door striking a wall. The house went quiet again. My phone recovered 1 bar of cellular signal. I dialed 911. The call failed. I tried Daniel. This time it rang. He answered immediately. "Mara, where are you?" "In the car. Claire is driving. Are the police there?" "Yes. Someone entered the house." "Is Elliot with you?" "Yes, he's hurt." Daniel inhaled sharply. "How badly?" "His shoulder. Maybe a sprain, maybe worse. There's smoke upstairs. The office window sensor triggered, and we can't get out." "Do not enter the office." I laughed once. It came out harsh and breathless. "That's your concern." "Mara, listen carefully. The wall space is unstable." "What does that mean?" "The house had an illegal renovation before we bought it. There are unfinished voids between rooms. Old wiring, weak flooring. You knew. We had it inspected. Then why is it connected to your son's room? It shouldn't be accessible." Elliot looked at me. Behind his fear, there was anger. "My dad opened it," he said loudly. Daniel heard him. "Elliot, that is not what happened." "You showed Mr. Vale." The line went quiet. "Who is Mr. Vale?" I asked. Daniel said, "Mara, stay in the bedroom until police reach you. Someone just tried to break down the door. The officers will clear the house." "Who is Mr. Vale?" Daniel did not answer. The call dropped. A pounding came from inside the wall, not the hallway, behind the bookcase. 3 hard blows, followed by scraping. Elliot stared at the shelves. "Becca," he whispered. I pulled him back. The back panel of the bookcase flexed outward. Something struck it again. Books shifted. A model rocket fell from the top shelf and broke on the floor. The sound was terrifying for several seconds, because it seemed impossible that anyone could be inside the narrow wall space. Then, a muffled male voice called, "Police." Relief surged through me too quickly. "Belmont Police," the voice repeated. "Can you hear me?" "Yes," I shouted. "We're in the bedroom. Move away from the wall." A metal tool punched through the thin back panel of the bookcase. Wood splintered outward. The officer was not trapped in some impossible cavity. He had entered the office and found the other side of the maintenance passage. A realistic explanation. A partial rescue. "Hold on," he called. He worked the tool downward, cutting or prying through the panel. The bookcase shook with each movement. Smoke curled past the shelves. "What's burning?" I asked. Electrical junction in the office wall, he said. Fire unit is coming up. We can get the kid through this opening. The bedroom door handle moved again. I spun around. The officer inside the wall heard it. Who's at the hall door? I don't know. Police, he shouted through the wall. Identify yourself. No answer. The handle stopped moving. A thin object slid under the door. At first, I thought it was a blade. Then I recognized a black plastic rectangle. A phone. It vibrated against the carpet. The screen lit up. A video was already playing. It showed me standing outside my apartment that afternoon in the green raincoat. The camera followed as I checked my phone, adjusted the target bag on my wrist, and entered my building. The person filming had been close enough to capture the buzz of my apartment door unlocking. Text appeared over the footage. You were supposed to come alone. Elliot saw it. What does that mean? I don't know. The officer behind the bookcase swore. Do not touch the phone, he ordered. We're almost through. The video changed. Now it showed the Rowans' kitchen from earlier that evening. Claire stood at the island, holding the laminated rules. Daniel knelt near the back door. I stood beside them. The camera angle came from high in the corner. One of the interior security cameras. The footage had been accessed remotely. Text appeared again. The police changed the schedule. A loud mechanical click came from the hallway ceiling. The smoke detector stopped beeping. Then a deeper sound rolled through the house. A furnace fan or ventilation motor starting. Air rushed from the bedroom vent. Smoke that had been gathering near the ceiling suddenly pushed downward, filling the room faster. The officer behind the bookcase coughed. Ventilation has been activated, he said. Get low. I dropped beside Elliot. The smoke burned my eyes immediately. It was no longer a faint layer. The system was distributing it through the house. Someone still had control of the smart home panel. The officer smashed through the remaining backboard. A jagged opening appeared between two shelves, barely wide enough for a child. I pulled books out and threw them aside. Through the gap, I saw the interior of the wall space. Exposed studs, cables, old plaster, and the officer crouched on a narrow plywood platform. Beyond him, through another broken panel, was the locked office. He was a broad man in a wet patrol jacket, his face streaked with dust. Send the boy first, he said. Elliot recoiled. The floor breaks. I'll hold him. Becca fell. The officer's expression changed. What did you say? A crash came from the hallway. The bedroom door opened 6 inches. The damaged frame had finally given way. A gloved arm reached through. I swung the poker. The hooked end struck the wrist. The intruder grunted and withdrew. The officer lunged toward the hole, but the bookcase prevented him from entering fully. Get the child through now, I lifted Elliot. He cried out as his shoulder shifted. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sorry. The officer caught him under the arms and pulled him into the wall passage. The bedroom door opened wider. A man in dark clothes pushed through sideways. His face was covered with a plain black mask. One hand hung injured from the poker strike. In the other, he held a canister with a nozzle. Pepper spray. He aimed it. I threw the fireplace poker. It struck his shoulder, but did not stop him. A cloud sprayed across the room. My eyes closed involuntarily. Heat exploded across my face and throat. I stumbled backward, coughing, hands searching for the hole in the bookcase. The officer grabbed my wrist. "Come through." I forced one knee onto the lowest shelf. The bookcase tilted. One anchoring bracket had torn loose from the wall. The entire unit leaned toward me, books sliding, shelves groaning. I pushed into the opening as the masked man seized the back of my shirt. The officer pulled. Fabric tightened across my throat, then tore. I fell through the broken panel into the wall space, landing on my knees beside Elliot. The officer kicked the remaining shelf support. The bookcase toppled into the bedroom with a tremendous crash, blocking the opening behind us. For half a second, it worked. Then the plywood beneath my knees cracked. A long split raced down the narrow platform. Daniel had not lied about the floor. The officer shoved Elliot toward the office side. "Move." The plywood collapsed behind us. My left leg dropped through up to the thigh. Nails tore my jeans and scraped skin. Below was darkness, extending to the first floor ceiling. The officer hauled me free. We crawled through the second broken panel and into the office. It was a small room with built-in cabinets, 2 computer monitors, and a window overlooking the front porch roof. Smoke poured from a blackened section of wall near the desk, where electrical wiring had melted around an open junction box. A second officer stood at the office door. He turned the lock. The knob would not move. "Hallway side is blocked," he said. The first officer crossed to the window and tried it. It opened. Cold rain blew into the room. Below, the porch roof sloped toward the front yard, where emergency lights flashed blue and red through the trees. "We go out here," he said. Then the office door shuddered under a heavy impact. The masked man had crossed from Elliot's room into the hallway. The first officer lifted Elliot onto the windowsill. Before he could move him outside, flames appeared at the broken wall opening behind us. Small at first, blue at the base, yellow above. They caught the exposed wood studs. The maintenance passage connecting the office and bedroom became a chimney. Fire climbed rapidly. The route back to Elliot's room vanished. The office door shook again. The porch roof was now the only way out. The officer climbed through the window with Elliot. I followed, dragging my injured leg over the sill. Behind me, the office door burst open. I did not look back. The window slammed shut as the heat changed the air pressure inside. The latch dropped into place. We're outside on a rain-slick roof, 2 stories above the front walk, with no ladder beneath us and fire spreading through the wall behind. There was no way back into the house. The porch roof was steeper than it had looked from inside. My right knee hit first, then both hands. The shingles were slick with rain and gritty, with loose roofing granules that embedded themselves in my cut palm. I began sliding toward the gutter before the officer caught the back of my jeans and hauled me sideways. "Stay flat," he said. His nameplate read as Harlan. I noticed because my face was 6 inches from his chest, and because concentrating on letters gave me something other than pain to think about. Elliot crouched between us, crying without sound. His injured arm hung against his body. Water ran from his hair over his cheeks. Below, emergency lights flashed across the front yard, the neighbors' windows, and the wet trunks of the maple trees. A fire engine had pulled up crooked behind two police cruisers. Firefighters were dragging a ladder from the side rack, but the walkway beneath the porch was narrow and crowded with shrubs. The office window slammed from inside. Once, twice, a dark shape appeared behind the rain-streaked glass. The masked man. He struck the lower pane with something heavy. "Move toward the left edge," Officer Harlan said, slowly. "Ladder S coming up there." The left edge of the roof overlooked the driveway. The right side ended above the front steps. Between us and the driveway was 12 feet of wet slope broken by a dormer vent. We moved one body length at a time. My eyes still burned from the pepper spray. Each breath scraped. My left thigh had gone numb except for one hot line where the nail had torn it. When I pushed with that leg, it trembled. Inside the office, glass cracked. The masked man hit it again. The lower pane burst outward. Shards scattered across the roof and skittered down the shingles. Harlan turned, one hand on his holstered weapon. "Police, stay inside. Show me your hands." The man kicked the remaining glass from the frame. Flames moved behind him through the broken wall opening, turning the office ceiling orange. He climbed out. No hesitation. He wore black work trousers, a dark rain shell, and a close-fitting mask that covered everything below his eyes. His right wrist bent strangely from where I had hit him with the poker, but his left hand still held the pepper spray canister. "Back," Harlan shouted. The man sprayed. Wind caught most of it and blew the orange mist sideways, but enough reached Harlan to make him turn his face. The officer fired once. The sound was enormous on the roof. The bullet struck the window frame. The masked man dropped low and lunged. Harlan met him shoulder first. They collided near the broken window. Boots slipped. Hands clawed at wet clothing. The man drove his forehead into Harlan's face, and the officer reeled backward. I pulled Elliot farther left, but her bent under my hip. Below us, a firefighter shouted, "Do not move. Ladder S coming," but we had to move. The masked man got one hand around Harlan's throat and pushed him down against the shingles. Harlan's pistol had landed 2 feet away, caught in the shallow valley beside the dormer. The man looked at Elliot. Not at me, at Elliot. "Come here," he said. His voice was unfiltered now. Middle-aged, American. Calm in a way that made the violence feel practiced. Elliot pressed against my side. "No," the man's eyes narrowed. "You were told not to involve strangers." "I didn't. You showed her the passage," she asked. The man shoved Harlan's head against the roof. "Come here, Elliot." I reached into my pocket for my phone. No signal, 3% battery. Useless as a call, not useless as light. I switched on the flashlight and aimed it directly into the man's eyes. He flinched. Harlan twisted, drove an elbow into his ribs, and broke the grip on his throat. They rolled. The masked man struck the dormer vent with his shoulder. The metal cover buckled. Harlan reached for his pistol. The man kicked it. The weapon slid down the roof. I lunged without thinking. My cut hand closed around the grip inches before it reached the gutter. I had never held a gun before. It was heavier than movies made it look and slick with rain. My finger went instinctively toward the trigger. Harlan saw me. "Finger off," he shouted. "Keep it pointed away." I pulled my finger straight along the frame. The The masked man rose into a crouch. "Put it down," he said to me. His tone had changed, not fear, assessment. "You don't know how to use that. No, you'll shoot the kid, maybe." The word came out before I could stop it. Elliot looked up at me. I shifted the barrel away from him, toward the man's legs. The masked man smiled beneath the fabric. I could see it in the movement of his cheeks. "You won't." That was the moment my flaw stopped being useful to him. For years, I had feared making scenes, feared accusing decent-looking people, feared being the woman who misunderstood a situation and ruined someone's night. Even now, with fire behind us and an armed officer bleeding on the shingles, part of me wanted certainty before acting. He knew that type of hesitation. He had selected for it: the application, the money, the photograph, the polite parents, the rules designed to make every warning sound like a child's behavioral problem. He had expected me to doubt myself until there was no time left. I lowered the pistol slightly. His weight shifted forward. Then I threw the gun over the left edge of the roof. It hit the driveway below with a metallic crack. The masked man stared. Harlan understood first. He drove both feet into the man's knees. The man fell sideways, sliding toward the gutter. He caught the edge with his left hand. His body swung over the porch steps. For a second, only his head and gripping hand remained visible above the roofline. Harlan crawled toward him. "Don't," I said. The officer looked at me. "He knows the house," I said. "He knows what happened to Becca. Take him alive." Harlan leaned over the gutter and grabbed the man's rain shell. The fabric stretched. The man pulled a folding knife from his pocket with his injured right hand. He stabbed upward. The blade entered below Harlan's vest, near his left side. Harlan grunted and lost his grip. The masked man dropped. He hit the porch railing first. Wood cracked. Then he landed on the front steps 6 feet below, shoulder and head striking almost together. He did not move. Harlan rolled onto his back. Dark blood spread through his wet uniform shirt. "Officer down," I screamed. The firefighters below changed direction. 2 ran toward the steps, while another kept raising the ladder. The office window behind us glowed brighter. A tongue of flame rolled out beneath the broken upper sash. "We have to go now," Harlan said. His voice was strained but controlled. He pressed one hand against his side. The ladder struck the gutter at the driveway edge. A firefighter climbed until his helmet rose above the roofline. Child first. Elliot would not move. He stared down at the masked man on the steps. The man's mask had shifted during the fall. One cheek and part of his jaw were exposed. Elliot made a broken sound. "Mr. Vale." The name seemed to stop the rain for half a second. Not because it did, because every uncertainty narrowed. The man on the steps was Vale. The person Daniel had shown the passage. The person Elliot knew. The firefighter reached toward Elliot. "Come to me." Elliot shook his head. "He'll get up." "He's not getting up right now," I said. "How do you know?" I didn't. One of the officers below knelt beside Vale and kicked the knife away. Another removed the pepper spray and handcuffed one wrist, then the other, despite the wrong angle of his injured arm. "Secure," the officer shouted. Vale coughed. "Alive." Elliot began shaking harder. He locked Becca in there. "Where?" "The wall." "Elliot, look at me." He did. "What happened?" His words came out in pieces. She found the cameras. She found his phone in Dad's office. Mr. Vale came through the closet. She tried to go across. The floor broke. Did she fall? He nodded. To the first floor. No, lower, the basement. The bolted basement door. The opening and closing sensor. Rule about checking the app before checking the windows. The service passage running through the house. Vale had used the voids to move unseen, and Becca had fallen somewhere inside them. A firefighter took Elliot by the waist. His injured shoulder shifted, and he screamed. The sound cut through everything. "I know," the firefighter said. "I'm sorry. I've got you." He eased Elliot onto the ladder and began taking him down one rung at a time. Behind us, the roof beneath the office window sagged. Heat pushed across my back. Harlan tried to sit up and failed. "You next," I told him. "No, you're bleeding. You can't carry me." He was right. The next firefighter climbed onto the roof and clipped a safety line to Harlan's vest. Together, they moved him toward the ladder. The officer's face had gone pale. He looked at me. "Did you touch the phone?" He slid under the door. "No." "Good. Why? Evidence." It sounded almost absurd. Evidence. As though the house were not burning behind us. But it mattered. The photograph mattered. The rules mattered. Becca's phone, if it existed, mattered. The fire roared inside the wall. The dormer vent beside me lifted half an inch, pushed from below by pressure. Then it blew off. Smoke burst upward. I flattened myself. Something struck the roof near my hand. A black phone, not mine. It had been forced out through the ventilation opening. The screen was cracked, but lit. A recording timer continued counting. 06:48, 19 hours. It had been recording long before I arrived. I recognized the phone from the video. The intruder had slid under the bedroom door. Same black case. Same chipped corner. Not Becca's phone. Vale's. A live feed or monitoring device hidden in the duct. I picked it up with the edge of my torn shirt, trying not to touch the surface. On the screen, an audio waveform moved. A voice played through the speaker. Daniel's, recorded earlier. "Vale, this is the last time. After tonight, you remove everything." Then Claire. "You said she matched Becca's height." Daniel again. "She only needs to trigger the system. Once the insurance inspector sees the faults," Vale's voice interrupted. "And the boy?" Silence. Claire finally answered. "He'll follow the rules." The recording cut into static. My body went still despite the heat. They knew. Not everything, perhaps. Maybe they had not expected Vale to attack. Maybe they believed they were staging a controlled security failure for insurance, evidence, blackmail, or some other plan they had convinced themselves would stay contained. But they knew Mara, me, had been selected because I resembled Becca. They had attached my photograph so Elliot would recognize the replacement, or so Vale would. The firefighter beside me saw the screen. "Bring it," he said. The roof cracked. A visible line opened between us and the ladder. "Move," I crawled. The gap widened behind my left foot. Shingles folded downward as the roof decking weakened. I threw the phone toward the firefighter. He caught it against his chest. My injured leg failed. I slid backward. My fingers scraped uselessly across the shingles. The gutter caught my heel for 1 second, then tore free from the fascia with a wrenching metallic sound. I went over. The firefighter caught my wrist. My cut palm reopened inside his glove. Pain flashed white through my vision. I hung above the driveway, boots swinging near the ladder. The fall was not enormous, 15 feet perhaps, enough to break my pelvis, crack my skull, leave me alive and ruined. "Grab the rung," he shouted. I reached with my free hand, missed. My shoulder felt as though it were pulling apart. Below me, Harlan was being lowered. Elliot was on the ground with another firefighter holding him steady. He looked up. "Mara," the way he said my name changed something. Not courage, desperation with a direction. I swung once. My fingers closed around the ladder rail. The firefighter shifted his grip from my wrist to the back of my belt. Foot on the rung. I found one, then another. By the time I reached the ground, my legs would not support me. 2 paramedics lowered me onto the wet grass. Across the yard, Vale lay strapped to a backboard. His mask had been removed. Graham Vale, a 46-year-old man, had a narrow face, graying beard, and blood running from his left ear. He looked ordinary. That was the final insult of it. No monstrous features. No wild eyes. He looked like someone who might inspect a furnace or install a camera and make small talk about traffic. His eyes found mine. "You weren't supposed to see the phone," he said. A paramedic pushed him back. "Stop talking." Police radios crackled around us. An officer approached carrying Harlan's pistol in an evidence bag. Another shouted from the side yard, "We've got 2 detained at the vehicle." I turned. Beyond the fire engine, officers had Claire and Daniel against the black Volvo. Claire's blue jumpsuit was dark with rain. Daniel's suit jacket was gone. His hands were secured behind him. Elliot saw them. He did not call out. Claire twisted toward the house. "Elliot," he pressed his face into the firefighter's coat. Daniel looked at me instead. His expression was not guilt. It was panic that I was alive. Fire broke through the second-floor front windows. Glass fell onto the porch roof. The room where the hidden recording had played vanished behind orange flame and black smoke. A firefighter covered me with a thermal blanket. The fabric smelled like plastic and disinfectant. "Is there anyone else inside?" he asked. I thought of Becca. "Yes," I said. The word tore my throat. "Possibly in the basement. A previous babysitter. There's a concealed passage." The boy says she fell. The firefighter's eyes changed. He related immediately. 2 crews moved toward the rear entrance with breathing apparatus and tools. I wanted to follow. I tried to stand. My left leg folded. A paramedic caught me under the arms. "You're done," she said. "Stay down." Across the lawn, Vale began laughing, not loudly, a soft, exhausted sound. "It's been sealed for months," he said. "You're too late." Elliot heard him. So did I. Whether Becca was alive had never really been an open question. Only whether they would find enough of her to prove what happened. The officers loaded Vale into an ambulance under guard. Claire and Daniel were placed in separate cruisers. Harlan was rushed away with pressure dressings packed against his side. The fire continued eating through the second floor. But Elliot was outside. I was outside. Vale was alive, identified, and in custody. The phone had survived. The police had heard Daniel and Claire's voices. The immediate danger was over. That did not feel like victory. It felt like reaching the edge of something after leaving pieces of yourself behind. Elliot sat on the back step of an ambulance, arms strapped against his chest, staring at the house. I sat beside him while a paramedic wrapped my hand. He leaned against my uninjured shoulder. Neither of us spoke. From inside the burning house came one final electronic chime, faint but unmistakable through the broken windows. Then the security system's synthetic voice announced, "Basement door open." The first thing they did at Mount Auburn Hospital was take away my clothes. Not because they were ruined, though they were. My jeans had been cut open around the thigh wound. My shirt was torn down the back, and the green raincoat had disappeared somewhere between the Rowan house and the ambulance. The clothes were evidence. A nurse placed each item into a separate brown paper bag and sealed the tops with tape while a Belmont detective watched from the doorway. That made everything feel more real than the fire had. The nurse's name was Janice Porter, a 53-year-old woman with short gray hair and the brisk patience of someone who had learned not to waste movement. She irrigated my right palm, picked roofing grit from the wound with forceps, and gave me 3 injections before stitching it. "You may feel pressure," she said. "I already feel pressure." She glanced at me over her mask. That was almost a joke. It was intended as one. "Good, keep doing that." My left thigh required 11 stitches. Nothing had torn deeply enough to need surgery, but the nail had scraped close to a nerve, leaving the outside of my leg numb from mid-thigh to the knee. My right shoulder was strained from hanging off the roof. The pepper spray had inflamed my eyes and airways, and the smoke had left me coughing gray mucus into a plastic basin. None of it was life-threatening. That sentence appeared several times in my discharge paperwork. It did not mean none of it mattered. Elliot was 2 floors above me in pediatric orthopedics. His shoulder had not been dislocated as I feared, but his collarbone was fractured and the joint badly bruised. He had mild smoke inhalation and glass cuts on one foot that none of us had noticed in the yard. He would recover physically. That was the phrase used for him. Officer Harlan underwent emergency surgery for the stab wound. The knife had missed his kidney and major vessels by less than an inch. He lost enough blood to spend 2 nights in intensive care, but he lived. Graham Vale had fractured his pelvis, left shoulder, and 3 ribs when he fell from the roof. He also had a skull fracture and bleeding around the brain. The hospital listed him in serious condition under police guard. Claire and Daniel Rowan were booked before midnight. I learned most of this from Detective Louis Ortega, a 47-year-old man with tired eyes and a coffee stain on one shirt cuff. He interviewed me at 2:15 in the morning in a small hospital consultation room while Janice changed the dressing on my hand. Ortega set a recorder on the table and asked me to begin with the babysitting app. I told him everything: the triple rate, the photograph, the laminated rules, the security code, Claire removing the picture and putting it into her pocket, Daniel's explanation about package theft, Elliot watching the basement door. When I got to the phone that had been forced from the roof vent, Ortega stopped me. "You did not unlock it. No, you didn't alter the recording. No, good. Officer Harlan said the same thing. He was right. The phone had continued recording until a firefighter shut it down and bagged it. Its local storage contained video from cameras hidden throughout the house, audio captured from the office and wall void, copies of Nestle profiles, schedules, photographs, and notes on previous babysitters. Not just Becca. There had been 5. Most had worked 1 or 2 shifts. 2 reported the Rowans to Nestle for strange instructions and were refunded without explanation. 1 left halfway through a booking after hearing movement inside the walls. Another had accepted cash to sign a confidentiality agreement after finding a camera inside the guest room's smoke detector. Becca had stayed longer. Her full name was Rebecca Sloan, a 21-year-old woman and a junior at Boston College when she disappeared 9 months earlier. She had been listed as a voluntary missing adult because she had recently argued with her mother, withdrawn several $100s in cash, and sent a message saying she needed space. The message had not been written by her. Vale had accessed her phone. Did they find her? I asked. Ortega looked down at his notes before answering. They found remains in a utility void beneath the basement stairs. There was no dramatic pause, no softened language beyond remains. The fire crew had entered through the rear after suppressing the second-floor flames. A section of ceiling in the basement collapsed during the search, exposing a narrow vertical shaft between the original foundation and a wall added during renovation. Rebecca had fallen approximately 16 feet. The injuries from the fall would not necessarily have killed her immediately. Vale's recordings answered what happened afterward. He had entered the basement through the concealed service route. Rebecca was conscious. Her leg was badly broken, and she could not climb. She threatened to call the police. Vale took her phone, closed the access panel, and left. Daniel discovered what had happened later that night. Claire learned the next morning. They did not call anyone. Daniel's construction company was already under investigation for permit violations. Vale had done unlicensed security and electrical work on several of Daniel's properties, including the Rowan house. Reporting Rebecca would have exposed the hidden rooms, cameras, falsified permits, and insurance claims. So they sealed the shaft. They left her there, I asked. Ortega nodded once. The room seemed to narrow. Janice stopped wrapping my hand. For several seconds, no one spoke. I tried to picture Rebecca in the dark, injured, hearing people moving overhead. My mind refused the full image and gave me fragments instead. A phone light extinguishing, a shoe against concrete, the vibration of the furnace through the wall. Was she alive when they sealed it? Ortega's jaw tightened. The medical examiner will make the final determination. That meant yes, or near enough. The bedtime rules had started after Rebecca disappeared. Elliot had heard more than his parents realized. He knew Rebecca entered through the closet. He knew Vale came afterward. He knew the basement door mattered. But he had been 8, frightened, and repeatedly told that Rebecca left through the front door after stealing from the family. The rules were presented as treatment for his fixation. Keep the hall light on so he would not walk toward the office in darkness. Do not let him use the parent's charger because it contained a shared smart home key and could unlock administrator settings. Check the app before checking Windows because the sensors were manipulated to redirect attention. Do not move furniture because the bookcase concealed the passage. Do not answer questions about previous babysitters after 9 because bedtime was when Elliot talked most freely. The photograph attached to the rules was Vale's edition. He had taken it outside my apartment. The Rowans had selected me because I was approximately Rebecca's height and build. Vale wanted a new sitter who could be filmed entering the concealed passage while wearing Rebecca's old green raincoat. That was why the person on the side camera looked like me. It had been Vale. The coat was not identical to mine. It was Rebecca's, recovered months earlier from a donation bin where Claire had placed it. Vale wore it to create footage that could later be edited with recordings of me. The planned scheme was complicated in the stupid way crimes often are when intelligent people believe complexity makes them safe. Daniel's company faced a civil claim over hidden electrical defects in another property. He and Vale intended to manufacture evidence that the Rowan house's smart home system could malfunction on its own, causing locks, sensors, cameras, and ventilation to behave unpredictably. They hoped to blame a subcontractor and establish a pattern of defective installation. My role was to report the failures. I was supposed to be frightened, but unharmed. The cache was meant to keep me inside long enough to witness a sequence of controlled faults. Claire and Daniel expected Vale to operate the system remotely from nearby. They claimed they did not know he planned to enter the house. Vale had other plans. Rebecca's hidden phone had never been recovered, and he believed Elliot knew where it was. He had arranged the evening to frighten Elliot into revealing the passage and to use me as leverage. The fire began when Vale overloaded the exposed junction to force us out of the bedroom. He had not expected me to call 911 so early. He had not expected police to enter through the office. Most of all, he had not expected the phone in the ventilation duct to survive. "What did 'you were supposed to come alone' mean?" I asked. Ortega rubbed his thumb along the rim of his paper cup. "We think he meant you were supposed to enter the wall alone, without the child." That was worse than the interpretations I had invented. Vale had planned to separate us. Once Elliot showed me the passage, Vale intended to trap me inside it and question him from the bedroom side. The photograph on the rules was for Elliot, a message that I had been chosen, a warning that Vale could reach anyone. By sunrise, I had answered the same questions for hospital staff, police, a fire investigator, and a representative from the district attorney's office. Repetition flattened the story. I became able to describe the masked man pushing through the bedroom door without hearing the wood split. I could explain throwing Harlan's pistol off the roof as a tactical decision instead of admitting I was terrified of firing it. My mother arrived at 7. She lived 3 hours away and had driven through the night after the hospital called. She entered my room carrying 2 vending machine coffees and wearing mismatched shoes. For once, She did not apologize to anyone. She put the coffees down and held my face between both hands. "You look terrible," she said. "I've been told I'm stable. That is not the same thing." "No." She sat beside me and cried quietly, which was harder to watch than panic would have been. I told her about the tuition emails I had ignored, the bills, the reason I accepted the money without asking enough questions. She listened. When I finished, she said, "Your father's rehab is not worth burying you for. It was an unfair sentence and a necessary one." The hospital discharged me late Saturday afternoon with crutches, antibiotics, an inhaler, and instructions not to work for at least 2 weeks. I did not go home. Ortega arranged for an officer to escort my mother and me to my apartment because Vale's files included my address, floor plan, and photographs of my windows. Nothing inside appeared disturbed. That did not help. I slept at my parents' house for almost a month. Elliot entered emergency foster placement for 6 days, then moved in with his maternal aunt in Worcester. Claire's sister had not known about the hidden spaces or Rebecca. Background checks confirmed that, though Elliot did not believe adults easily anymore. I visited him 2 weeks after the fire. His aunt brought him to a quiet diner off Route 9, the kind with laminated menus and sugar packets stacked in chrome holders. His arm was in a sling. He had dark circles beneath his eyes and had cut his hair very short because he said the smell of smoke stayed in it. He ordered pancakes and did not touch them. "You found Becca," he said. "The firefighters did. You told them where." "You did." He considered that. "Are my parents going to jail?" "Yes." I did not say probably. Daniel eventually pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter, conspiracy, evidence tampering, unlawful surveillance, insurance fraud, and several lesser charges. Claire went to trial. Her attorney argued that Daniel and Vale controlled her, that she feared losing Elliot, and that she never understood Rebecca was still alive when the shaft was sealed. The recordings contradicted her. She was convicted of manslaughter, conspiracy, and evidence tampering. Vale recovered well enough to stand trial 18 months later. The jury convicted him of second-degree murder in Rebecca's death, attempted murder, aggravated assault, kidnapping-related charges, unlawful surveillance, and arson. Officer Harlan testified. "So did I." Harlan walked with a cane by then. The stab wound had caused permanent nerve damage in his left leg. He joked before court that we matched. Neither of us laughed very hard. Nestle was sued by Rebecca's family and by 3 previous sitters. The company had received complaints about the Rowans, but treated each one as a customer service dispute. Their safety system verified identities and payment methods, not hidden cameras or illegal construction. The app sent me a formal apology and a credit for future bookings. I deleted my account. The Rowan house was declared structurally unsafe and demolished the following spring. Investigators removed walls section by section before the demolition, documenting cables, cameras, access panels, and 2 hidden recording stations. Rebecca's phone was found inside the wall behind Elliot's closet. The battery was dead, but the memory card worked. It contained several short videos including one in which she whispered the date, showed the hidden cameras, and said Daniel and Claire were lying about who could access them. The last video ended with the sound of the bookcase moving. Her family received the phone. I never watched the footage. 6 months after the fire, I returned to Boston and moved into a 3rd-floor apartment in Somerville with 2 roommates. There was no smart lock. The front door used a metal key that stuck in winter, and the radiators knocked hard enough to wake me. I liked both things. I went back to school part-time, not because the experience gave me a new appreciation for life. People like clean lessons after ugly events, but trauma rarely organizes itself that well. I went back because the university offered financial aid after I finally answered their emails, and because speech therapy was still work I understood. I stopped babysitting. For a while, I could not enter homes where cameras were visible. Doorbell chimes made my shoulders rise. Synthetic voices from appliances caused a pressure behind my eyes. I slept with a chair under the knob, even though my roommates complained about the marks on the floor. Therapy helped. Time helped differently. Some things faded, others became habits. I always check whether windows open. I learn every exit before I sit down. I no longer worry much about appearing difficult. Elliot sends me a message twice a year through his aunt, usually on my birthday and on the anniversary of the fire. They are short. I'm okay. School is annoying. I still hate pancakes. The latest one arrived while I was studying at my kitchen table. He was 11 by then. The message included a photograph of a model rocket he had built for science class. It was painted blue and white, with one crooked fin. Behind the rocket was a laminated sheet pinned to his bedroom wall. I enlarged the image. At the top, in Elliot's handwriting, it said, RULES 4 people who come into MY room most were ordinary. Knock first. Do not touch the rocket. Leave the hall light on. At the bottom was one final rule. If the basement sensor goes red, don't tell me it's broken. His aunt's house did not have a basement sensor. I called her immediately. She checked the room, the hallway, the windows, and the smoke detector. Nothing was hidden. No unfamiliar devices appeared on the router. The police inspected the house and found no sign that Vale or anyone connected to him had contacted Elliot. His aunt later explained that Elliot had copied the line from memory. He used it as a reminder that adults could be wrong even when they sounded certain. That explanation made sense. I accepted it. Mostly. I printed the photograph and placed it in a folder with my court papers, medical records, and the original copy of the bedtime rules Ortega returned after the trial. The photograph Claire had folded into her pocket was still attached as evidence. In it, I stood outside my old apartment wearing the green raincoat, unaware of the camera. Whenever I look at it, I notice the same detail. Across the street, in the 2nd floor window where I assumed Vale had been standing, the glass reflects the sidewalk behind him. There are 2 figures in the reflection. Vale was only ever charged as the photographer. No one identified the second person. That's it for this nightmare. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on notifications. It really helps keep the stories alive. And don't stop here. Dive into another one of our videos and keep the fear going. Hey everyone, this is Mia Horror Stories, and the title of today's horror story is I'm a night janitor at a wax museum, and one figure keeps losing weight. For your comfort, the screen will stay black throughout the video, so you can relax without strain and just focus on the story. Make sure you stick around until the end. Sometimes the last few moments are the ones that stay with you the longest. The first thing I noticed was the gap around the wrist. It was maybe half an inch, no more than that, between the wax hand and the silver watch strapped over it. The watch had always fit tight enough to leave a shallow impression in the painted skin. I knew because I cleaned that display every night, including the tiny crescent of dust that collected under the buckle. That Tuesday, I could see straight through the gap to the black velvet curtain behind the figure. I stood there with my spray bottle hanging from 2 fingers and listened to the building settle around me. The ventilation system gave its usual tired shudder above the ceiling tiles. Somewhere on the 2nd floor, a refrigeration unit clicked on inside the staff kitchen. From the street came the wet hiss of tires passing over Baltimore's rain-darkened pavement. Nothing moved. Nothing had to move. Wax softened. Straps stretched. People bumped displays. The museum was old, and old buildings were always producing little mysteries that turned out to be screws, moisture, mice, or somebody lying about what they had touched. I tightened the watch 1 notch, wiped the glass, and continued my round. My name is Daniel Mercer. I was 36 years old then, male, recently divorced, and working nights at the Mid-Atlantic Museum of History and Culture, because the job paid $2 more an hour than the office cleaning company that had let me go. The museum sat in a converted department store on North Charles Street, 6 blocks from the Inner Harbor, and close enough to the nightlife that drunk college kids sometimes slapped the front windows after midnight. History and culture was generous. Most people called it the Wax Museum. The 1st floor had presidents, athletes, civil rights leaders, and local celebrities. The 2nd floor had film characters, musicians, and a badly lit horror exhibit that used motion sensors and compressed air effects. The 3rd floor was offices, storage, and restoration rooms that visitors never saw. My shift ran from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. I emptied trash, polished rails, scrubbed bathrooms, vacuumed carpet, wiped fingerprints from glass, and tried not to think about how realistic some of the figures looked when the emergency lighting flattened their faces. That last part mattered more than I admitted. I did not like mannequins, not wax figures specifically. Anything human-shaped that could not answer back bothered me. Clothing store dummies, CPR torsos, those headless plastic forms tailors used. When I was 8, my older brother locked me overnight in our father's basement as a joke. There had been a dressmaker mannequin down there, one our mother used for sewing. I spent 6 hours watching its outline beside the furnace until I became convinced its shoulders had turned toward me. I knew better as an adult. Knowing better did not always help. At 10:40 that night, I was replacing a trash liner near the museum entrance when the staff elevator opened behind me. "You're early," I said. Marisol Vega stepped out carrying a cardboard drink tray and a ring of keys big enough for a jailer. Marisol was 42, female, the museum's overnight security supervisor, and the kind of person who checked a locked door twice, even after watching somebody lock it. She wore her dark hair in a tight bun and kept a paperback crossword book tucked inside her security desk. "I'm 7 minutes late," she said. "You're early for being late. That sentence is why your wife left you." Ex-wife. Then the paperwork worked. She handed me a coffee without asking whether I wanted one. Marisol and I had settled into that kind of friendship, the kind built almost entirely out of tired insults and small favors neither person acknowledged. She watched the cameras from the security room while I made my rounds. Twice a night, she walked the building herself. We rarely talked about our lives outside work, which suited both of us. She looked past me toward the first floor gallery. Everything quiet. Watch was loose on Holly's. Holly's, the shipping guy, she frowned. The figure's name was Malcolm Holly's, a Baltimore dock worker who had helped organize a longshoremen's strike in the 1930s. He was not famous outside the city, but the museum had devoted a whole alcove to him because one of the founders claimed to be his grandnephew. Holly stood beside a painted shipping crate, wearing blue coveralls, leather boots, and a flat cap. He was posed with one hand holding a cargo manifest and the other resting near his hip. The watch was not historically accurate. It had been added after a donor complained that his wrist looked unfinished. Marisol set her coffee on the reception counter. "How loose? Enough to move a notch. You sure you didn't leave it that way? I don't touch the costumes unless something's wrong. You just said you touched it. You know what I mean." She glanced toward the gallery again, not worried exactly, just filing the information somewhere. "Put it in the log," she said. "You want me to log a loose watch? I want you to log anything you adjust. Restoration gets territorial. That is why everyone loves paperwork. No one loves paperwork. Paperwork is what you do so nobody can say you never told them." She took her coffee and walked toward security. At 11:15, I started the first floor bathrooms. There was comfort in bathroom work. Tile was tile. Soap scum did not resemble a person in low light. I sprayed the sinks, wiped the mirrors, and listened to a baseball podcast through one earbud while leaving the other ear open for Marisol's radio calls. The museum smelled different at night. During visiting hours, the air carried perfume, wet coats, children's snacks, and the sugary scent from the lobby kiosk. After closing, those smells thinned out, leaving floor polish, warm electronics, old carpet, and the faint chemical sweetness of wax. Around midnight, rain began ticking against the tall front windows. By 12:30, I had cleaned the president's gallery and moved into local history. The Holly's figure stood at the far end under a cone of yellow light. The pose was supposed to look proud. At night, the angle of his chin made him seem tired. I stopped before reaching the alcove. The watch hung loose again, not as loose as before. Maybe I had not tightened it properly. Maybe the strap was cracked. I wheeled my cart closer. The buckle remained in the hole I had chosen. I remember that clearly because there was a pale nick in the leather beside it, and I had noticed the nick while fastening it earlier. The strap had not changed. The wrist had. I leaned closer to the glass. Holly's hand looked narrower than I remembered. The tendons along the back were more pronounced, though that could have been the lighting. Restoration artists layered color in thin washes, and shadows shifted when bulbs aged. One of the overhead lamps had been flickering for weeks. I pressed my thumb against the display glass to compare its width to the wax wrist. That was not scientific. It was barely a thought. My thumb looked thicker. The radio clipped to my belt cracked. "Daniel," Marisol said, "you on one?" I flinched hard enough to bump the cart. A metal mop handle knocked against the plastic bucket with a sharp, hollow clang. "Yeah," I said, pressing the transmit button. "Local history. You set off the west motion zone. I'm standing in it. Helpful clarification. I live to serve. Come by security when you finish. Camera 4 keeps dropping frames. Copy." I kept looking at Holly's. The wax around his wrist had a slightly duller finish than the back of his hand. I could see a faint seam beneath the shirt cuff, almost hidden by painted wrinkles. That gave me an explanation. The figure had been repaired. Somebody had replaced part of the arm, and the joint had shifted under the sleeve. It was ordinary. Annoying, but ordinary. I opened the display door with the cleaning key Marisol had issued me. The hinges whispered. Cool air rolled out from the alcove, carrying the smell of fabric and wax. I touched the wrist with one gloved finger. Firm. Wax museum figures were not candles. Most were built around fiberglass or resin cores, with wax layers on visible skin. They did not melt because a room got warm. Still, the wrist felt colder than I expected. I slid the watch up the forearm until it fit snugly, then took a photo with my phone. In the picture, Holly's face appeared behind my hand, blurred and pale. I deleted it and took another from the side. Better. That was when I heard shoes on the marble near the entrance, not Marisol's. She wore soft, soled security boots. These steps clicked. I straightened and shut the display door. A woman came around the corner, wearing a tan raincoat over black trousers, her ID badge swinging against her chest. "Why is that open?" Her voice was not loud, but the question hit with the clean edge of an accusation. Dr. Elaine Voss was 51, female, the museum's chief conservator, and the only employee who regularly came in after midnight without warning. She had short gray blonde hair, thin metal glasses, and a habit of examining people's hands while they spoke, as though checking them for residue. She treated the wax figures less like objects and more like patients whose privacy the rest of us kept violating. "The watch was loose," I said, again. The word came out before she could smooth it over. I looked at her. "You knew about it." Elaine stepped closer and inspected the wrist through the glass. "I noticed some costume settling last week." Costume settling. The fabric relaxes. Fasteners shift. The buckle didn't shift. She turned her eyes toward me. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she pulled a pair of nitrile gloves from her coat pocket. "Open it." I unlocked the case again. Elaine raised the sleeve with 2 fingers. Beneath it, the wax forearm narrowed unnaturally toward the wrist. Not dramatically. It looked like a sculptor had become distracted halfway down, shaving away a few millimeters too many. She took a small fabric measuring tape from her pocket and wrapped it around the wrist. 6.2 centimeters, she murmured. Is that bad? It is smaller than the mold specification. How much smaller? She hesitated. About 7 millimeters, I laughed once. It was not because anything was funny. Wax doesn't lose weight. No, that's the name of the material. I'm familiar with the material, Daniel. Then, what am I looking at? Elaine released the sleeve. Seemed irritated, but not with me. Her gaze kept returning to the figure's wrist, and I noticed a tension in her jaw that I had never seen during our previous arguments about cleaning chemicals or microfiber cloths. Do not touch him again, she said. I touched him because the watch was falling off. Next time, call me. At midnight. Yes. Were you here because of this? Elaine removed her gloves one finger at a time. I was here because I have work. At 12:40 in the morning. Some of us have deadlines. Her answer was plausible. So was mine. That was what made the exchange feel worse. Marisol appeared at the gallery entrance holding her radio. She looked from Elaine to me to the open display. What happened? Nothing, Elaine said. Then why is his case open? Costume adjustment. Marisol came closer. Her eyes settled on the watch. You moved it higher. I did, I said. Elaine shut the case herself and held out her hand for the key. I did not give it to her. That belongs to security, Marisol said. I want this display restricted. Then file the restriction. I am filing it verbally. And I am verbally telling you that isn't how keys work. Elaine's mouth tightened. The rain ticked steadily against the windows. The overhead light above Holly's buzzed, dimmed, then steadied again. Finally, Elaine said, No one opens this case without me present. Marisol glanced at me. Fine. I'll put it in the temporary log until morning. And the cameras. What about them? I want the alcove footage preserved. Marisol's expression changed by a degree. Why? Elaine looked at Holly's. Because I need to know whether anyone has been tampering with the figure. That explanation was reasonable too. Almost everything was reasonable. Elaine left 10 minutes later, her heels clicking back across the marble until the elevator doors closed around her. Marisol and I stood beside my cleaning cart without speaking. Then she said, she lied. You got that too. She didn't come here for a deadline. How do you know? She signed in at 11:58 and went straight to the restoration floor. Didn't turn on the main lights. She was up there 9 minutes, then came down here. To Holly's, maybe. I looked at the figure through the glass. The watch now sat halfway up his forearm, snug against the blue sleeve. Camera 4, I said. You said it was dropping frames. Marisol nodded slowly. That camera covers this gallery. How many frames? 3 gaps tonight. 12 seconds, 17 seconds, and just under a minute. Equipment fault, could be. She said it the way people say a bridge could probably hold. From the second floor came a sudden mechanical shriek, followed by 3 heavy thumps. I grabbed the cart handle. Marisol raised her radio, listening. Nothing followed. Then the building settled back into its usual hum. Horror exhibit compressor, she said. Probably. She looked toward security, then toward the staff elevator. We can either finish the shift, she said, write down exactly what we saw, and let management bury it under 6 meetings. Or we check the archived camera storage before Elaine has a chance to request access. That sounds like a policy violation. It is. Could get us fired. Yes. I looked once more at Malcolm Holly's. The flat cap shadowed his eyes. One wax hand held the cargo manifest. The other rested beside a watch that no longer fit the place it had been made to fit. Marisol started walking toward the security room. After 3 steps, she stopped. "You coming?" I thought about the overdue rent on my new apartment. The child support payment scheduled for Friday. The email from my ex-wife reminding me that our daughter's school trip deposit was due. I thought about Elaine's face when she saw the measurement, and how quickly she had tried to make the problem smaller by naming it something ordinary. Costume settling, fabric relaxation, tampering. All explanations that placed the cause outside the figure. The elevator machinery groaned inside the wall. I left the cleaning cart beside the display. Then I followed Marisol. The archived video did not show anyone touching Malcolm Holly's. That should have made me feel better. It did not. Marisol pulled the footage up on the center monitor in the security room. A cramped, windowless space behind the admissions desk that smelled of burnt coffee, warm plastic, and the citrus cleaner she used on the console. 12 camera feeds filled the wall above us. Empty galleries, locked stairwells, the loading dock, the lobby where rainwater shivered down the glass doors in crooked silver lines. Camera 4 occupied the largest screen. At 11:31 p.m., Holly stood in his alcove with the watch tight around his wrist. At 11:38, the image froze. It was subtle. No static. No black screen. The timestamp kept moving, but the rain reflected in the gallery windows stopped, and the loose corner of a hanging banner held perfectly still. Marisol leaned close. There. The feed remained frozen for 12 seconds. Then motion resumed with a slight jump. The banner moved. Rain slid down the glass. Holly's looked the same. "Anything?" I asked. "No." She rewound it and played it again. The screen paused on its own. For a moment, I thought she had hit the controls, but Marisol's hands were flat on the desk. The video player displayed a gray loading circle, turned twice, and closed. "Network hiccup," I said. "Archived footage doesn't stream from the internet." "Internal network, then." "Maybe." She reopened the file. This time it played past the gap. At 11:52, the feed froze for 17 seconds. At 12:19, it stopped for 54. During that longest gap, the timestamp continued advancing, as if everything were normal. When the gallery returned, the watch hung lower. Not dramatically lower. It had shifted maybe a quarter of an inch toward the hand. Marisol paused the image. "There," I said. "I see it. Could be the angle. The camera doesn't move. Compression artifact." "That is not what compression artifacts do." She said it sharply, and I felt myself bristle. I had a bad habit of explaining things past the point where an explanation helped. My ex-wife called it cross-examining reality. She said I could turn an apology into an argument by refusing to let anything remain unclear. I pointed at the screen. Somebody could have entered outside the frame. The case is entirely in frame. Could have reached around the curtain. From inside the wall, I'm trying to make sense of it. "So am I." The security room phone rang. Both of us jumped. Marisol picked it up. "Security." Her face changed while she listened. What time? She looked at the clock above the monitors. It was 1:08 a.m. No, don't touch anything. Keep them outside. She hung up. What? Water alarm and restoration. Sprinkler, leak sensor, zone 3. Where's zone 3? She was already reaching for her keys. Wax storage. We took the staff elevator to the 3rd floor. The elevator climbed with a low vibration that came through the soles of my shoes. Marisol stood beside the control panel, watching the numbers light one by one. Who called? I asked. Building monitoring company. They call security directly. When a sensor trips after hours. Did Elaine set it off? She signed out at 12:54. You watched her leave. Front camera caught her crossing the lobby. So the room should be empty. Yes, the doors opened. The 3rd floor was colder than the galleries. Restoration had its own climate system, and the air carried a dry chemical smell, solvent, plaster dust, cotton cloth, something faintly oily. Half the ceiling lights were off to conserve energy. The ones that remained made long pale strips on the linoleum. A red indicator flashed on the environmental panel beside the elevator. Water detection room 3B. Marisol took out her radio. Control to monitoring. We're on site at zone 3. Static answered. Then a man's voice said, Copy. Sensor remains active. Room 3B sat at the end of the corridor behind a gray fire door. A printed sign read material storage, authorized conservation staff only. Water had already reached the hallway. Not much. A thin, clear line had crept beneath the door and spread along the grout between the floor tiles. Marisol swore. How bad can it get? I asked. The room is above local history. I looked down automatically, as if I could see through the floor to Holly's. What's stored in there? Wax blocks, molds, costumes, electrical equipment, and water. That too. She tried her key. It did not turn. Wrong key. No, she tried again, pushing the door inward to relieve pressure. The key stopped halfway. Deadbolt? I asked. There is no deadbolt. The radio crackled. Security. Water alarm has expanded to adjacent sensor. The voice sounded bored, which made the message worse. Marisol keyed the radio. Can you shut off the zone? Negative. You need to isolate the source locally or contact building emergency maintenance. How long for maintenance? A pause. On-call technician estimates 45 to 60 minutes. Marisol stared at the water. We don't have an hour. Copy. The operator sounded no more concerned than before. A drop struck the inside of the door. Then another. The sound was small and regular. Tick, tick, tick. Fire department, I asked. For a plumbing leak. If the ceiling comes down on the gallery, it won't stay a plumbing leak. We call the fire department. Management gets called. Elaine gets called. They ask why we were reviewing restricted footage instead of doing rounds. That is not a reason to let the building flood. I didn't say it was. You sounded like you were considering it. I am considering everything. She stepped back and examined the frame. The latch side showed no damage. The hinges were on our side, heavy commercial hinges with fixed pins. Someone locked it differently, I said. There is no different way to lock it. Then the lock broke. Locks don't usually break while doors are closed. Usually. Marisol gave me a look. Stop doing that. Doing what? Making every bad possibility sound equally likely. I almost argued. Instead, I looked at the water line, which had widened around the toes of my work shoes. The museum had a written emergency procedure for leaks. I had seen the red binder in the janitor's closet during training. The steps were simple. Identify the source, protect collections, isolate electricity, notify management, call emergency services if structural damage was possible. The problem was that every useful step started on the other side of the locked door. I can get tools, I said. What kind? Pry bar, cordless drill, maybe a reciprocating saw. From where? Basement maintenance cage. You don't have cage access. Frank does. Frank is asleep in Dundalk. His key might be in the lockbox. Marisol's expression told me it was not supposed to be. Camera coverage, I asked. Basement corridor, yes. Inside the cage, no. So that's another policy violation. Daniel, just keeping track. Another alarm tone chirped from the environmental panel behind us. Adjacent room, humidity high. Marisol looked up at the ceiling. Go. I took the stairs because the elevator felt too slow. The service stairwell was bare concrete and steel, lit by fixtures protected behind wire cages. My shoes squeaked on each landing. By the second floor, my left knee had begun to ache, an old warehouse injury that flared whenever I took stairs too quickly. I passed the sealed door to the horror gallery. Something struck the other side. One heavy thud. I stopped. The motion effects were supposed to be disabled after closing. The compressor could cycle, but the figures should not activate without visitors crossing the sensors. Another thud came from farther inside, then a scrape. I stood with my hand on the rail, listening. The rational part of me produced explanations in a frantic line. Loose panel, settling prop, air pressure, cleaning equipment rolling against a wall. The other part took me back to my father's basement, to the furnace clicking on and the mannequin waiting beside it. Not now, I whispered. The phrase sounded ridiculous in the stairwell. My radio popped. Daniel, status. Moving, you stopped. I looked up at the small black dome camera in the corner. You watching me? I'm watching the stairwell because you stopped moving. Thought I heard something in horror. Compressor. Sounded heavier. Get the tools. I continued down. The basement smelled damp, even on dry nights. Pipes ran exposed along the ceiling, some wrapped in old insulation painted white. The maintenance cage stood beyond the loading corridor, its chain-link walls filled with ladders, toolboxes, replacement bulbs, floor machines, and stacks of flattened cardboard. A metal lockbox hung beside the door. I opened it with my janitor key. Inside were 6 labeled hooks: electrical, HVAC, plumbing, elevator, master MAINT. The last hook was empty. I stared at it. Marisol. What? Master maintenance key is gone. Check the floor. I'm looking at an empty hook. Frank may have taken it home. Would he? No. Who else has access? Management. Elaine, building engineer. Elaine was here. I know. I crouched and looked through the chain link. The pry bar hung from a pegboard 12 feet away. The top of the cage stopped a foot below the basement ceiling. I set my cleaning gloves on the floor and pulled a rolling trash bin beneath the gap. You're not climbing that, Marisol said through the radio. How do you know what I'm doing? Loading corridor camera. I can fit over. You have a bad knee. I have a functioning other knee, Daniel. I climbed onto the bin. It shifted beneath me, wheels clicking against the concrete. I grabbed the chain link and pulled myself upward. The steel wire pressed into my palms through the thin gloves. Halfway up, the bin rolled. My right foot slipped. My chest struck the top rail, knocking the air out of me. The radio tore loose from my belt and hit the floor. For a second, I hung there with one arm hooked over the cage. Then I dropped back onto the bin. Pain spread across my ribs in a hot band. Marisol's voice came faintly from the radio on the floor. Daniel, Daniel, answer me. I'm fine. You are not fine. Get down. I climbed again before she could keep talking. This time, I wedged the bin against a stack of salt bags. I reached the top, pushed through the narrow gap, and swung one leg over. The edge caught my trousers and tore them above the knee. My bad leg cramped as I lowered myself inside. I landed awkwardly. Pain snapped through my knee so hard that the room narrowed for a moment. I grabbed a shelving unit before I fell. Still fine, I called, though Marisol could not hear me without the radio. The pry bar was easy to find. So was a cordless drill, but the battery indicator flashed red when I tested it. I took both. On the way back over the fence, I noticed something on the workbench beneath the keyboard. A strip of blue cloth. It was folded into a narrow rectangle and sealed inside a clear evidence-style bag. A paper tag had been stapled to the top. HOLLIS, left sleeve, original textile. I picked it up. The cloth was dark blue, faded at the edges. One end had a small brown stain and several tiny holes. The bag had been cut open along the bottom and taped shut again. Daniel, Marisol's voice echoed from the radio outside the cage. Talk to me. I tucked the bag into my waistband, climbed out, and retrieved the radio. I've got the tools. What happened? Slipped. Are you bleeding? I checked my palms. One had a shallow cut near the thumb. Barely. Your knee. Working. That is not an answer. It's the answer we have time for. By the time I returned to the third floor, the water had spread across half the corridor. Marisol took one look at the tear in my trousers. You're limping. I'm walking. She grabbed the pry bar. Together, we wedged it between the door and frame near the latch. The metal flexed, but held. Again, she said. We leaned into it. The door gave a fraction. Water surged through the new gap, colder and deeper than I expected, washing over our shoes. Something scraped on the other side. Not plumbing, not a pipe. Something heavy was braced against the door. Marisol stopped pushing. Do you hear that? Yes. We looked at each other. She raised the radio. Security to monitoring. We may have unauthorized occupancy in room 3B. The operator answered immediately this time. Do you require police response? Marisol hesitated. That hesitation cost us. The lights went out. The corridor dropped into complete darkness for perhaps 1 second. Then the red emergency fixtures came on, weak and pulsing from battery power. The environmental panel shrieked. Multiple warnings filled its display. Water detection. Humidity high. Climate system offline. Electrical fault. A heavy impact struck the door from inside. The pry bar jumped in Marisol's hands. She stumbled backward and fell into the water. I reached for her, putting weight on my bad knee. The joint buckled. I went down beside her, one hand splashing against the floor. The impact came again, harder. The door opened half an inch, then slammed shut against whatever had been placed behind it. Through the gap came a smell I recognized from the Holly's display. Wax, old fabric, and beneath both, sharp enough to sting the back of my throat, gasoline. Marisol pushed herself upright. "Police," she said into the radio. "Send police and fire. Now." The operator began confirming the address. I looked toward the elevator. Its floor indicator was dark. The stairwell door at the other end of the corridor had closed behind me when I returned. A green emergency light glowed above it. Then the light changed to red. A magnetic lock engaged with a loud metallic clack. Marisol heard it too. She turned. That door should fail open. The handle would not move. Behind us, inside room 3B, something dragged slowly across the floor and pressed against the blocked door. Water continued flowing around our shoes. The gasoline smell became stronger. Marisol held out the pry bar. "We can keep trying this door," she said, "or we can break into Elaine's restoration lab and find another way out." "Does her lab have an exit?" "No." "Then how does that help?" "It has the manual controls for this floor." Another strike hit the storage room door. A screw popped from the frame and spun into the water. Marisol tightened her grip on the pry bar. "Choose, Daniel." I looked at the dark elevator, the locked stairwell, and the door beginning to separate from its frame. Then I pulled the bag of blue cloth from my waistband. Marisol stared at it. "Where did you get that?" "Maintenance cage." Her eyes moved from the label to the cut seam at the bottom of the bag. A shadow passed beneath the door of room 3, beneath the shifting shadow of water. 2 feet. Someone was standing inside. The handle began to turn. The handle turned once, slowly, then stopped. Marisol raised the pry bar with both hands. I took a step back and nearly went down because my left knee had started to swell inside my trousers. The pain no longer came as a clean jab. It had become something heavier, a pressure under the kneecap that made the joint feel packed with wet sand. The person inside room 3B did not open the door. Instead, something clicked against the metal from the other side. A lock. Marisol stared at the handle. They just relocked it. Maybe they saw the radio. Through a steel door. Maybe there's a camera. She glanced up. There was one in the corridor, a black dome mounted above the elevator. Its status light was dark. The environmental panel kept sounding its alarm in short electronic bursts. Water flowed steadily beneath the storage room door and traveled east along the corridor toward Elaine's lab, following a slight dip in the floor. West of us were the dead elevator and the locked stairwell. East were 2 restoration rooms, a photography bay, Elaine's lab, and another fire door that led into administrative offices. That second fire door should have offered a route around to the main stairs. It was 20 yards away. Water had already reached it. "Lab first," Marisol said. "We get the locks released and isolate power. What about whoever's in there? We don't open a barricaded room that smells like gasoline." That sounded like somebody choosing not to die. It was. She started east. I followed, slower. Behind us, the storage room handle moved again. Neither of us turned around. Elaine's lab was the last room before the administrative fire door. Its door had wired glass in the upper half and a keypad beside the handle. Glass was reinforced with a square metal mesh. Inside, under red emergency lighting, I could make out stainless steel tables, shelving, articulated lamps, and 2 human torsos standing upright on work supports. One had no head, the other had no arms. I looked away from them. Marisol entered a code. The keypad flashed red. She tried a second, red again. "Whose codes are those?" I asked. "Night security override and building emergency." "Are you sure you entered them right?" She looked at me. "Just checking. The panel isn't accepting credentials. Because of the electrical fault, the lock has backup power. So somebody changed the code or disabled central access." She keyed her radio, monitoring. "Can you remotely release 3rd floor access doors? Static." She tried again. Nothing. The water had begun touching the soles of the fire door beyond us. A faint humming came from behind it, irregular and low. Marisol put the radio near her ear. Signals dropping. We're surrounded by concrete and metal. We had signal 30 seconds ago. I held up my phone, 1 bar, then none. The humming behind the fire door became louder. I stared at it. "That's electrical." "No," Marisol said. "You sure?" "Yes." The sound grew into a rough vibration, then a rapid pounding directly against the other side of the door. I backed into the lab wall. Marisol swung toward the noise, pry bar raised. The pounding stopped. Something scraped along the bottom of the door. A dark shape pushed through the narrow gap beneath it. It moved in jerks. My body reacted before my brain did. I kicked at it with my good leg. The shape shot sideways in the water and struck the wall. A floor-cleaning robot spun in place, its round plastic shell blinking orange. For half a second, no one spoke. Then Marisol lowered the pry bar. "You almost died fighting a vacuum." It came under the door. It's a Roomba. It was aggressive. Machine bumped the wall twice, turned, and rolled back toward the fire door. Its brushes had pushed the water ahead of it, making the low humming sound. I let out a breath that hurt my ribs. Marisol crouched and grabbed the unit before it disappeared. "Administrative cleaning service leaves these running after hours," she said. "So the door isn't sealed. It has a gap. That doesn't help us fit through." She flipped the robot over. A strip of black electrical tape had been placed over one of its sensors. "Is that normal?" I asked. No, caught in the spinning brush was a yellow plastic card. Marisol pulled it free. The card was a temporary contractor badge. Its photo had been scratched away with something sharp, but the barcode remained. The printed expiration date was 6 months earlier. Could it open the lab? I asked. Expired credentials should be dead. Should be. She shot me a tired look, but slid the card against the reader. The keypad flashed green. The lock clicked. Neither of us moved. "That's not good," I said. "No. Somebody reactivated an old contractor badge. Or the system reverted to an old permission table when the main controller failed. Which answer do you prefer? The one that gets the door open." She pulled the handle. The lab door opened 3 inches and stopped. Something blocked it from inside. Marisol pushed harder. A wheeled stool rolled backward across the floor with a squeal. The door opened enough for us to squeeze through. Inside, the air was colder and drier than the corridor. Battery-powered climate monitors blinked on the walls. The torso stood near the far table, white and unfinished under the emergency light. One was split vertically from collarbone to waist, exposing a hollow fiberglass shell. I kept my eyes on the floor. Marisol shut the door behind us, but did not lock it. "Control station," she said. A desktop computer and 2 wall-mounted panels occupied the north side of the lab. One panel controlled temperature and humidity. The other handled door access for the restoration floor. The computer screen was black. Marisol pressed the power button. Nothing. She opened the cabinet beneath the access panel and found a handwritten laminated card zip-tied to the wiring. Manual release. Hold override plus zone for 5 seconds. "Finally," I said. She pressed override and the button marked fire egress. The panel beeped. For 1 second, the stairwell icon turned green. Then every light on the panel went dark. A relay snapped inside the wall. From the corridor came a metallic clack. The lab door locked behind us. Marisol tried the handle. No movement. "Partial success," I said. "What part was successful?" "We learned the system can get worse." She struck the door once with the heel of her hand. I moved to the panel and shone my phone light inside the open cabinet. Several wires had been pulled free from a terminal strip. Not shaken loose. Pulled. The copper ends were clean. "Marisol," she came over. Somebody had cut one wire and stripped another. A third had been bridged to the wrong terminal with a short length of blue insulated cable. "You know electrical?" she asked. "Enough not to touch that. The panel is low voltage. The building around it is full of water and gasoline." She crouched despite her soaked trousers. "The bridge is holding the magnetic locks closed. You can tell that. The terminals are labeled," she pointed. "Lock hold." The blue wire ran from that terminal to backup power. "So remove it. Could short the board. It's already useless. It may be the only way to unlock the stairwell." The pounding at room 3B started again. Muted by 2 doors and 20 yards, it sounded less like an impact now and more like deliberate work. Metal against metal. 3 strikes. Pause. 3 strikes. "Whoever's in there is breaking out," I said, "or breaking something open." Marisol wrapped her fingers in the bottom of her shirt and pulled the bridge wire free. The panel sparked. She recoiled. The lights flashed back on. For an instant, the fire egress icon glowed green. Then smoke curled from the circuit board. Every magnetic lock on the corridor released with a chain of heavy clicks. "Go," she said. We pushed out of the lab. The eastern administrative fire door had unlocked. The western stairwell indicator had also turned green. We had 2 routes. The administrative route was closer, but it passed through offices toward the main public stairwell on the south side of the building. The western route led directly down beside the elevator, past room 3B. Marisol pointed east. "Offices," I nodded. We crossed the wet corridor and shoved through the fire door. The administrative side was carpeted and almost completely dark. Cubicles occupied the center. Closed offices lined the exterior walls. At the far end, approximately 40 yards away, an illuminated exit sign marked the door to the south stairwell. We made it 10 yards before the fire door slammed shut behind us. A second later, its indicator turned red again. "The board burned," Marisol said. so we keep moving. The office carpet muffled our steps. My limp had worsened. Each time I bent my knee, something rubbed inside the joint. My wet shoe squeaked despite the carpet. Halfway across the room, we found the south exit blocked by darkness. Not an absence of light. A tall black shelving unit had been pushed across the stairwell door. It was loaded with archive boxes. Marisol leaned into it. The unit moved half an inch and stopped. "Brakes," she said. I crouched and felt beneath the bottom shelf. The casters had footlocks. I released one, then another. The third was jammed under the weight. "Push on 3, I said. We both leaned in. The shelf rolled a few inches. A box fell from the top and burst on the carpet. Photographs slid across the floor. Most showed wax figures under construction, heads without eyes, hands arranged in foam trays, faces marked with measurement lines. One photograph landed against my shoe. It showed Malcolm Hollies lying on a restoration table. His coveralls were open down the front. Inside the wax figure's torso was a long rectangular cavity. Something dark had been fitted inside it. I picked up the photograph. Marisol. She looked. There was writing on the back in Elaine's narrow script. "Core replacement, temporary material. Do not display." The date was 8 years earlier. "What's inside him?" I asked. "I don't know." A loud crack came from the third-floor restoration corridor. Then another. The person in room 3B had reached the door frame. Marisol grabbed the photograph and shoved it into her jacket. We moved the shelf. We pushed again. The jammed caster released with a sharp pop. The shelf rolled far enough to expose the stairwell handle. Marisol pulled it. The door opened 6 inches. A chain stopped it. Someone had looped a heavy steel chain through the interior crash bar and around the railing on the other side. I stared through the gap. The chain was secured with the missing master maintenance key ring threaded through the padlock shackle. "Somebody wanted us to find this route," I said. "No, somebody wanted us to waste time on it." She shut the door. My phone vibrated. A single delayed message arrived from an unknown number. No signal did not mean no data had queued earlier. The message contained no text, only an image. The photograph showed Marisol and me inside Elaine's lab, taken through the wired glass window less than 5 minutes earlier. In the lower corner, the blue sleeve bag was visible sticking from my waistband. A second message arrived. "Put it back." Marisol read it over my shoulder. "Do not answer." I wasn't planning to. "Turn off your phone. Police could call. They already have our location." I powered it down. The third message appeared before the screen went black. 2 minutes. 2 minutes to what? I asked. The fire alarm began. Unlike the environmental panel, it was not a quiet electronic chirp. Horns blasted throughout the building in a synchronized pulse. White strobes began flashing above the cubicles, turning the office into a series of frozen images. A recorded voice followed. "Attention. A fire emergency has been reported in the building. Proceed to the nearest exit." No smoke had reached us. Yet, Marisol grabbed my arm. "North Service stairs." "Where?" "Back through restoration, past 3B, through the photography bay. There's a narrow equipment stair to the loading dock. That takes us toward the gasoline. It takes us to an exit that may not be chained." Another Another crash came from the restoration side. The fire door buckled inward. The upper hinge tore partly away from the frame. A hand appeared in the gap. It wore a black work glove. Then the gap closed. The person was not trapped in room 3B anymore. They were in the corridor. Marisol and I shoved the shelving unit against the administrative fire door as a barricade. It was not much. The casters rolled too easily on the carpet, even with 2 brakes locked. We ran north through the cubicles toward a smaller connecting door that led into the photography bay. The door opened. Inside, photographic backdrops hung from ceiling rollers. Light stands and camera tripods crowded the narrow floor. A curtain-changing area occupied one corner. Beyond it was another door-marked equipment stair loading dock. We crossed the room. Halfway through, something stepped out from behind a hanging gray backdrop. I swung the dead, cordless drill before I knew what I was looking at. The drill struck a face. The face cracked. A wax head toppled from a rolling stand and hit the floor. It split above the left ear. Foam padding and a wooden support dowel showed inside. I stood there, panting. The figure had been dressed in a museum maintenance uniform. Marisol looked at the embroidered name patch. Frank. That's the building engineer, she said. It's a figure of Frank. It shouldn't exist. Behind us, the connecting door shuttered. Someone hid it from the office side. Marisol ran to the equipment stair door and pressed the crash bar. It opened. Cold, damp air rose from below. The stair was narrow and steep, descending 2 floors in a concrete shaft toward the loading dock. No elevator. No intermediate exits. We started down. I took the stairs sideways, gripping the rail. My knees shook with every step. Marisol stayed 1 flight below me, looking back up between landings. At the level of the 2nd floor, smoke drifted through a ventilation grill. Thin, gray, and real. Gasoline, I asked. Could be electrical. The fire alarm voice repeated its instruction. From above came the bang of the photography bay door opening. We continued down. At the bottom, Marisol pushed the loading dock exit. It did not move. She hit the crash bar again. A yellow chain crossed the outside handles, visible through the small, reinforced window. Beyond it, on the loading dock, blue police lights flashed against the wet pavement. A patrol officer stood less than 20 feet away, pulling at the exterior handle. Marisol pounded the glass. Hey, the officer saw us. He raised one hand and shouted something we could not hear through the door and alarm. Then the loading dock lights went out. The police strobes kept flashing. In those blue intervals, I saw movement behind the officer. A hooded person crossed between 2 delivery trucks and disappeared toward the alley. The officer turned and followed. Don't, Marisol said, though he could not hear her. Stay at the door. He vanished from view. The equipment stair door above us opened. Footsteps started down. Slow. Measured. The stairwell was too narrow to pass anyone coming the opposite direction. The loading dock exit was chained from outside. The only route left was a small utility door beneath the stairs marked sprinkler control, no storage. Marisol yanked it open. A concrete service tunnel stretched beyond it, barely 6 feet high, lined with pipes. According to a faded evacuation diagram, it ran beneath the loading dock to the original department store boiler room. and an old coal delivery hatch at the rear alley. We entered. I pulled the utility door shut behind us. There was no lock. Marisol wedged the pry bar through the handle and a pipe bracket. The footsteps reached the bottom landing. Stopped. The utility door handle pressed downward. The pry bar flexed. Somewhere ahead in the tunnel, a pump started with a deep mechanical rumble. Water rushed through the pipes overhead. Then, a sprinkler main beside us split at a corroded coupling. The pipe burst open. White torrents struck the wall and filled the tunnel from side to side, knocking Marisol off her feet and tearing the blue sleeve bag from my hand. The bag shot away in the current toward the dark boiler room. Behind us, the utility door began opening against the bent pry bar. We could no longer return to the stairwell. The rising water left only one direction, deeper under the museum. The current took the sleeve bag around the bend. Marisol crawled after it. "Leave it," I said. She did not answer. The burst sprinkler main filled the tunnel with a roar that swallowed the fire alarm above us. Water struck the concrete wall, rebounded, and ran ankle deep toward the old boiler room. It carried rust flakes, insulation fibers, and bits of black grit that stuck to my wet trousers. Behind us, the utility door opened another inch. The pry bar shrieked against the pipe bracket. A black-gloved hand pushed through the gap. Marisol. She looked back. The hand withdrew. The pressure on the door stopped. That frightened me more than the pushing had. "He's going around," she said. "How?" "There has to be another entrance." The evacuation diagram had shown one, the coal delivery hatch opening into the rear alley. It had also shown a service stair from the boiler room to the basement loading corridor. Our pursuer knew the building better than we did. He had keys, old badges, access to cameras. He had prepared the exits before we even understood there was a problem. Marisol grabbed the sleeve bag where it had snagged against a pipe support. We moved deeper. The tunnel descended slightly, making the water rise from our ankles to our shins. The ceiling dropped low enough that I had to bend. Every step sent a grinding pain through my left knee. My ribs hurt when I breathed deeply, so I took short breaths that left me lightheaded. 20 yards ahead, the tunnel opened into darkness. The old boiler room smelled of damp brick, heating oil, and hot metal. Most of the original machinery had been removed, but 2 iron boilers remained against the east wall like huge black safes. Modern sprinkler pumps occupied the center of the room. Copper pipes and red painted mains crossed the ceiling. A fluorescent work light lay on the floor, still shining. Beside it was Frank. For 1 second, I thought he was another figure. He sat tied to a support column with his hands behind him. Gray hair stuck to his forehead and silver tape wrapped around his mouth. His maintenance shirt was missing. He wore a white undershirt darkened with sweat and blood near the collar. Frank Dombrowski was 58, male, the museum's building engineer, a heavy-set former union electrician who complained about his knees, hoarded spare parts, and called every computer problem a software tantrum. I had spoken to him dozens of times. Seeing him blink at us was what made him human again. Marisol reached him first. She tore the tape from his mouth. Frank sucked in air. "He's coming," he said. "Who?" "Owen." A metal door slammed somewhere above. Frank flinched so hard the back of his skull struck the column. "Owen Pike," he said. "Old contractor, restoration fabricator." I had never met Owen Pike. He was 44, male, a former museum contractor whose temporary badge had supposedly expired after he was dismissed for stealing materials. Frank described him in broken pieces, while Marisol sawed at the plastic ties around his wrists with the sharp edge of the contractor badge. Owen had returned weeks earlier using copied keys and an old Access account that had never been removed from the backup controller. Frank discovered him in the basement that evening, moving boxes from restoration storage. "What boxes?" I asked. Frank looked at the sleeve bag. "The Holly's core." A sound came from the service stair at the south side of the boiler room. One footstep, then another. Marisol freed Frank's hands. "What is the core?" Frank rubbed his wrists. "Lead-lined steel cassette, built inside the torso." "For what?" "Documents originally. Museum founder used the figure as a private safe. Documents don't make a wrist shrink." "No." Frank looked toward the stairs. Owen's been cutting wax from the arms. I understood before Frank finished. Patching material. The dull skin at Holly's wrist. The unnatural taper. The loosened watch. Wax removed in small amounts. Softened and used to reseal cuts somewhere less visible. "The torso," I said. Frank nodded. Owen opens the back seam, removes something from the cassette, then melts matching wax to close it. "What's inside now?" "Gold." The word sounded absurd in that room. Frank saw my face. "Small historic coins. Donated collection. Never cataloged publicly." Elaine found the old core records during restoration 8 years ago. She told the director the figure shouldn't be displayed until the cassette was removed. But it was displayed. The director refused, said moving Holly's would raise questions with the donor family. And Elaine kept records, watched the figure. She suspected somebody was accessing it. The camera footage, her late-night visits, her demand that no one touch the case. "She knew it was Owen?" Marisol asked. "No, she thought it might be me." Frank gave a humorless laugh. "That's why there's a wax figure wearing your uniform," I said. His face emptied. "What figure?" "In photography." Frank stared at us. From the stairs came the click of a gun being cocked. "Because you were supposed to die in the fire," Marisol said. A man stepped into the work light. Owen Pike wore dark waterproof trousers, a gray hooded jacket, and black work gloves. He was lean, with a close-trimmed beard and a narrow face shiny with rain or sweat. In his right hand, he held a compact revolver. His left was the missing maintenance key ring. He looked at Frank. "You always talked too much." Frank shifted as though he might stand. Owen raised the revolver. Frank stopped. "No one needs to be brave," Owen said. "Put the bag down." Marisol held the sleeve bag against her chest. "You texted 2 minutes," she said. "I was trying to get you out of the offices before the smoke spread. That was thoughtful. I didn't start the fire to kill you. You chained the exits to control where people went." "That is not better." Owen's eyes moved to me. "You're the janitor." I did not answer. "You noticed the watch." Still, I said nothing. He gave a small nod, almost respectful. Most people don't notice anything. The tunnel water continued pouring into the boiler room. It spread beneath the pumps in a shallow sheet, reflecting the work light. Owen pointed the revolver toward the sleeve. Down, Marisol set the bag on the floor. What did you do with the coins? She asked. Not your concern. You've been removing them a few at a time. Easier to sell. Easier to hide. The camera gaps. Maintenance mode. Old system holds the last frame when the recorder loses the live feed. The water leak cut supply hose in storage. And the gasoline, Owen's gaze shifted toward Frank. For the body. Frank closed his eyes. The wax figure in his uniform would burn badly, but perhaps badly enough. In a damaged building, with fragments of clothing, personal items, dental confusion, and a missing man, it could delay identification. It did not have to fool investigators forever. It only had to buy Owen time. You left your contractor badge in a vacuum, I said. Owen's mouth tightened. That wasn't for you. It had been planted for whoever followed the route. A key that opened Elaine's lab. A breadcrumb designed to move a witness through controlled doors. You wanted Elaine to find Frank's figure, Marisol said. I wanted the cameras to show her moving through restoration after midnight. Her prints are on Holly's. Her notes mention the core. She had motive to remove it. And then she dies too. Owen did not answer. That was answer enough. A low mechanical alarm began sounding beside the sprinkler pumps. Frank looked over. Pump overheating. The burst main was demanding more water than the system could supply. One motor vibrated hard against its mount. Owen stepped closer. Hands where I can see them. Marisol raised hers. I did the same. My phone, powered off, sat in my right pocket. The dead drill hung from my belt. Neither helped, but the contractor badge was still in Marisol's hand. The plastic edge had cut halfway through Frank's restraints. A strip of white tie remained around one wrist. Frank saw me looking. His eyes moved toward the red valve wheel behind Owen, then toward the sprinkler pump. I knew almost nothing about the system. Frank knew everything. He mouthed one word, pressure. Owen saw the movement. What? Frank lunged, not at Owen, at the red valve. He threw his weight against the wheel and spun it. Owen fired. The shot inside the brick room was enormous. Frank dropped. Marisol screamed his name. The valve wheel continued turning from momentum. The pump alarm changed pitch. A pressure gauge needle climbed. Owen stepped toward Frank. I pulled the dead drill from my belt and threw it. It struck Owen's forearm. The revolver fired again. The bullet hit a copper pipe above us. Water exploded downward in a hard, narrow stream. Owen stumbled, blinded. Marisol charged him with the sleeve bag wrapped around her hand. She hit his gun arm. The revolver fell and skidded beneath the nearest boiler. Owen grabbed her hair and drove her face first into the pump housing. I heard the impact. Marisol folded. I went at him. My left knee failed on the second step. I crashed into Owen low, shoulder against his hip. We both went into the water. My ribs compressed against the concrete, and something inside my chest seemed to tear. Owen struck me behind the ear. Light flashed across my vision. He rolled on top of me and pressed his forearm against my throat. You should have finished your shift, he said. Behind him, Frank was moving. Blood spread across his undershirt near the right shoulder. He dragged himself toward the pump controls with his good arm. did not see him. Marisol did. She lifted her head from the floor. Her nose was bleeding. One side of her face had already begun to swell. "Daniel," she rasped. Owen glanced toward her. I hooked 2 fingers under the watch on his left wrist. It was not a weapon. It was barely an idea. I pulled. The leather strap snapped. Owen's balance shifted just enough. I rolled, got one knee between us, and shoved. He fell sideways. Marisol kicked him in the throat. Not cleanly. Not like a movie. Her wet boot glanced off his chin, but it stunned him long enough for me to crawl toward the boiler. The revolver lay beneath it. I reached. Owen caught my bad ankle. He pulled. My knee twisted. Something popped. I screamed and lost the gun in the darkness beneath the boiler. Owen climbed over my legs. Then the sprinkler pump surged. Frank had hit the manual test switch while the outlet valve was nearly closed. The damaged coupling in the tunnel burst wider. A second pipe joint above Owen failed. Section of red main tore loose and swung down on its bracket. It struck Owen across the shoulder and knocked him into the open maintenance pit beside the old boiler. He fell 6 feet. The sound when he landed was thick and final, but he was still conscious. He groaned and tried to rise. The loose pipe continued discharging into the pit. Water climbed around him. "Shut it off," Marisol said. Frank reached weakly for the control. Owen found the revolver. It had fallen into the pit through a drainage gap. He raised it. I grabbed the silver watch strap I had torn from him, looped it around the pump's emergency stop lever, and pulled with both hands. The motor shut down. Pressure vanished. The swinging pipe dropped lower, pinning Owen's gun wrist against the pit wall. He fired once. The bullet struck the underside of the boiler. Rust and metal fragments sprayed his face. He dropped the gun. Marisol crawled to the edge of the pit and kicked it into the rising water. Owen tried to free his arm. The pipe held him. The room became quieter as the pump wound down. Not silent, never silent. Water ran through the tunnel. The fire alarm pulsed overhead. Frank made short, wet sounds each time he breathed. Marisol found a wall phone beside the control cabinet. The line was dead. She took Owen's phone from his jacket, held it above the pit, and unlocked it using his face while he cursed at her. The phone had one bar. She called 911. This time, she did not explain everything. "Victims," she said. "1 gunshot. Armed suspect contained in the old boiler room beneath the loading dock. Rear coal hatch. Tell officers not to use the loading stair. There may be gasoline and fire above us." She repeated the location twice. Frank was fading. I crawled to him and pressed both hands against the wound in his shoulder. Blood came through my fingers, warm despite the cold water. "You're going to keep pressure," I told him. He gave me a tired, irritated look. "That's your job." "No. Cleaning is my job." Same principle. Marisol sat beside us, one hand braced against the side of her face. The first officers reached the coal hatch 8 minutes later. We heard them before we saw them. Metal grinding, shouted commands, tools hitting the old exterior plate. Nobody arrived miraculously. Nobody came through cleanly. The hatch had been painted shut and partly blocked by masonry. During those 8 minutes, Owen begged us to move the pipe, then threatened us, then offered money. No one answered. When the hatch finally opened, Rain-cooled air moved through the boiler room. Officers entered with shields and rifles. Firefighters followed after the revolver was recovered, and Owen was handcuffed in the pit. Frank was carried out first. Marisol went next, walking with help. I tried to stand. My left leg folded beneath me. 2 firefighters lifted me onto a board. As they carried me toward the hatch, I looked back at Owen. He sat against the pit wall, soaked and bleeding, one shoulder bent at an angle that made me look away. On the floor near the pump, the blue sleeve bag had torn open. The original fabric lay in dirty water. Beside it were 3 small gold coins that had been sewn inside the cuff decades earlier. Owen had not known they were there. Neither had Elaine. All that violence, all that planning, and he had still missed something. Above us, the museum's fire suppression system finally activated in local history. Water poured through the ceiling around Malcolm Holly's. By the time firefighters reached the display, the figures patched back had split open. The steel cassette inside him was empty. His silver watch, the one I had tightened twice, had fallen from the narrowing wrist and shattered on the gallery floor. The first person who asked me what happened was a paramedic whose name I never learned. He leaned over me in the back of the ambulance and cut my trouser leg open from the knee to the thigh. The fabric peeled away from skin already swollen tight and glossy. "What did you hear?" he asked. I heard it pop. When, on the stairs, then again in the boiler room. Twice, I think. He touched the outside of my knee. I shouted before I could stop myself. "All right," he said. "That answers that." The ambulance smelled of plastic, disinfectant, and wet wool from the blanket thrown over me. Rain struck the roof in quick bursts. Through the rear windows, I could see the museum entrance lit by emergency vehicles. The old stone facade washed red and blue. People had gathered behind the police tape. Even at 2:30 in the morning, people came to watch a building fail. Marisol rode in a separate ambulance. Frank went ahead of both of us. At the hospital, the night broke into pieces. X-rays, questions, a nurse cutting off my sock because I could not bend my leg, a police detective waiting until the pain medication had made my mouth dry before asking me to explain the camera footage for the 3rd time. My kneecap had partially dislocated. 2 ligaments were torn, one badly enough that I would need surgery. I had 3 cracked ribs, a deep bruise behind my left ear, and a cut in my palm that required 6 stitches because the tunnel water had carried enough dirt and rust to make the doctor nervous. Marisol had a fractured cheekbone, a broken nose, and a concussion. She spent the rest of that morning vomiting into a paper basin whenever she tried to sit upright. Frank's bullet wound missed the major artery under his collarbone by less than an inch. The round passed through the muscle above his shoulder blade and lodged near the skin. He lost a great deal of blood, but he survived. The doctors told us all of that separately. I learned most of it from Detective Lena Brooks, 46, female, a Baltimore Police Department detective assigned to major crimes. Because the case included attempted murder, arson, unlawful imprisonment, and theft involving museum property. Brooks spoke quietly and never filled pauses for people. She would ask a question and wait until the silence became uncomfortable enough that you answered more honestly than you intended. She visited my hospital room shortly after sunrise. "You're lucky," she said. I looked at the immobilizer strapped around my leg. "I've had better weeks. You're alive. Your coworkers are alive. The suspect is alive. That helps." "How does him being alive help me?" "He can explain things." "Will he?" Brooks sat in the chair beside the window. "He has explained enough." Owen Pike had asked for an attorney almost immediately, but police recovered his phone, copied access cards, maintenance keys, sale records, photographs of the Holly's restoration, and a storage unit contract in his name. The storage unit contained tools, wax pigments, costume fragments, 2 empty gasoline cans, and 19 gold coins wrapped individually in acid-free tissue. 8 more coins had already been sold. The buyers were not accomplices in the violence. They were collectors who believed the coins had come from an estate. 1 lived in Virginia. 2 were in Pennsylvania. The rest had passed through a dealer outside Washington who asked very few questions and kept excellent invoices. "Was Elaine involved?" I asked. Brooks watched me for a moment. "No evidence of that. She was there that night. She suspected someone was opening the figure. She had been measuring the exposed areas for 3 weeks. Why didn't she tell security?" "She told the museum director. And the director told her to document it internally and avoid alarming staff until they could determine whether the changes were environmental." I laughed, then grabbed my ribs. Brooks waited for the pain to pass. "Environmental," I said, "according to the director." She knew it was. Dr. Voss believed someone might be accessing the figure through a rear maintenance panel. She checked the restoration floor because she thought the tools might have been returned there. Why act like I was the problem? She thought you might be the person touching the figure. That answer should have offended me. Instead, it made sense. Elaine saw unauthorized changes, missing material, and a janitor with a case key who worked alone at night. She distrusted me for the same reason Marisol, and I distrusted her. Everyone had enough information to be suspicious and not enough to be useful. Brooks opened a folder. "There's another issue." The museum's original donation records listed 32 coins in the Holly's collection. Police had accounted for 27, 19 in Owen's storage unit, 8 sold. The 3 found in the sleeve brought the total to 30. 2 missing, I said, possibly missing for decades. Or Owen sold them without records. Possible. Does he say? He says there were only 27 inside the cassette when he first opened it. You believe him? I believe physical evidence more than I believe him. She closed the folder. The 3 coins sewn into the sleeve had been there long enough for the thread to oxidize and stain the fabric. They had not been placed recently. Somebody had hidden them before the figure's major restoration 8 years earlier, perhaps before it entered the museum. No one knew why. The museum closed indefinitely. Officially, the reason was fire and water damage. The electrical system on the 3rd floor required replacement. Smoke had entered several galleries. Sprinkler water damaged costumes, paper displays, floor coverings, and sections of painted scenery. The fire itself had remained small. Owen had poured gasoline in room 3B and along the rear of the photography bay, but the leak he created spread water across the ignition area. When he tried to start the fire remotely using a modified heating element, the circuit shorted. The smoke we saw came mostly from melted wiring and a scorched stack of packing foam. Another failure in his plan. Another thing that had nearly killed us anyway. The museum's insurance company sent investigators before I left the hospital. So did the city fire marshal, the Department of Labor, and lawyers representing the museum board. For the first few days, my phone rang constantly. Then my attorney told me to stop answering. I did not have an attorney before that week. Marisol found one through her union and gave me the number. The man charged more per hour than I made in 2 shifts, but he agreed to delay billing after seeing the police report. The museum placed both of us on paid administrative leave. That lasted 11 days. On the 12th, an email arrived saying all overnight operations staff had been temporarily laid off because the building would remain closed. They thanked me for my service. I read that line 3 times. Then I laughed until my ribs hurt. My surgery took place 2 weeks after the incident. The surgeon repaired the torn ligament and removed a small piece of damaged cartilage. He told me I might always feel the knee in cold weather. He was right. Physical therapy began with exercises so small they felt insulting. Tighten the thigh. Hold 5 seconds. Release. Slide the heel 2 inches. Stop if the pain becomes sharp. I hated every minute of it. My private fear had always been helplessness disguised as embarrassment. It was easier to say I disliked mannequins than to admit I could not stand being trapped, watched, or unable to trust what I saw. After surgery, that fear followed me into ordinary rooms. I hated elevators. I checked door handles twice. If a security camera froze on a store monitor, I noticed. The worst was clothing shops. Plastic figures stood in windows under perfect lighting, hands open, faces blank. Once, at a department store near my apartment, I saw a male mannequin wearing a silver watch that hung too loosely around its wrist. I left without buying anything. My daughter noticed changes before I did. Sophie Mercer was 9, female, my daughter, and old enough to understand that adults lied when they said they were fine. During her first weekend visit after surgery, she watched me inspect the lock on the apartment door before bed. "Is somebody coming?" she asked. "No." "Then why did you check it 3 times?" "I didn't." "You did." She said it without accusation. I sat on the edge of the couch with my brace stretched in front of me. "There was a man at work who hurt some people," I said. "Sometimes my brain acts like he might still be nearby." "Is he?" "No." "Then your brain is wrong. Basically." She considered this. "Can you tell it? I'm trying." That became the phrase we used. When I checked a window twice, she asked whether my brain was being wrong again. I never told her the details. I did not tell her about the gunshots, the body-shaped figure wearing Frank's uniform, or Owen's hand coming through the steel door. I told her there had been a fire and a bad man had been arrested. That was enough. Frank spent 6 days in the hospital. His right arm remained weak, and 2 fingers went numb whenever he lifted anything heavier than a coffee mug. The museum offered him an early retirement package that his lawyer described as an attempt to purchase silence with insulting arithmetic. He did not take it. Marisol returned home after 3 days, but struggled with headaches, nausea, and gaps in concentration. She would begin a sentence and lose the final word. That frightened her more than the broken bones. We spoke by phone every few days. Neither of us enjoyed talking about the museum, so we discussed physical therapy, bad television, and the strange foods people brought when they thought you were injured enough to need casseroles. One afternoon, she said, "I keep hearing the fire alarm. In your apartment, in my head, I understood. I hear the pump." We sat without speaking. Then she said, "That sounds worse. It isn't a competition. Everything is a competition if you're immature enough." That was the first time she sounded like herself. Elaine visited me once. She arrived at my apartment carrying a paper bag from a bakery and an archival folder tucked beneath her arm. She looked smaller outside the museum, less severe. "I owe you an apology," she said. "You suspected me." "Yes, I suspected you. Yes, that seems balanced." "It is not." She set the folder on my table. Inside were copies of her reports about Holly's, measurements, photographs, dates, requests to remove the figure from display, emails from the director delaying action. "You were right," I said. "I was ineffective. That isn't the same thing. It can have the same result." Elaine had resigned. She said the board asked her to remain until the insurance review concluded, but she no longer trusted them to act on safety concerns unless the danger was visible to donors. "What happens to Holly's?" I asked. "The figure is evidence for now, and after, it may be destroyed." The water had damaged the clothing. Heat had softened patches on the torso. Firefighters cutting open the display caused additional fractures. More importantly, the hidden steel cassette made the figure part of a criminal case and an embarrassment to the institution. Elaine slid a photograph from the folder. It showed Holly's after recovery from the gallery. He lay on a padded table. His shirt had been removed. The back of his torso was split in long, uneven seams where Owen had repeatedly opened and resealed it. Without the costume and lighting, he looked less human. That should have comforted me. It did not. "The watch?" I asked. Elaine looked toward the folder. "Police retained it." "Why?" "It had wax residue and Owen's skin cells on the strap. The evidence that began everything was now sealed in a police property room." I found that reassuring. For a while, Owen Pike accepted a plea deal 7 months later. Attempted first-degree murder, armed false imprisonment, arson, felony theft, destruction of property, unlawful possession of a firearm because of an older conviction no one at the museum had checked when they hired him. He received 28 years. At sentencing, Frank attended in a sling. Marisol sat beside him. I watched from the back with a cane across my knees. Owen did not look at us. His attorney described him as a man under severe financial pressure who had made escalating mistakes. Marisol whispered, "Mistakes don't buy gasoline." The judge must have agreed. The museum never reopened under its old name. The board dissolved the nonprofit the following spring. The building was sold to a hospitality group that announced plans for a boutique hotel with retail space on the first floor. Most of the collection went to storage or other museums. Some figures were auctioned. Others were dismantled because repair costs exceeded their value. Frank settled his civil case. Marisol did too, though she would not tell me the amount. My case took longer. The museum's insurer argued that my injuries occurred while violating access procedures. My attorney produced the emergency manual, the failed locks, the ignored reports, and the email thanking me for my service. We settled. It was not enough to change my life. It was enough to pay the medical bills, clear my overdue rent, cover Sophie's school expenses, and let me stop taking night work. I became a custodian at a community college in Catonsville. Day shift. The buildings had wide windows, ordinary classrooms, and no wax figures. Students left coffee cups everywhere and clogged sinks with paper towels. Professors complained about thermostat settings as if temperature were a moral issue. I liked it. At 4:30 each afternoon, I clocked out while the building was still full of voices. 2 years passed. My knee never returned to what it had been. On stairs, I led with the right leg. In rain, it ached before the weather app changed. Marisol became a dispatcher for a private security company. Frank moved to Delaware near his sister and sent us photographs of fish he claimed to catch. Elaine took a conservation position at a university archive. We met for coffee once a year on the date of the incident. No speeches, no anniversary ritual, just coffee. The last time we met, Marisol brought a newspaper clipping. Construction workers renovating the museum building had found a narrow cavity behind the local history wall. Inside were old electrical plans, donor correspondence, and a decayed ledger from the museum's founding. The ledger listed the Holly's coins, 32 donated, 3 concealed in the sleeve for emergency transfer, 29 placed in the torso cassette. I read the line twice. Police recovered 30, I said. Elaine nodded. 19 from storage, 8 sold, 3 from the sleeve. That means Owen took 27 from the cassette. Yes. And the ledger says 29 were inside. Yes. 2 coins were still unaccounted for. They might have disappeared decades earlier. A founder could have taken them. A restorer could have removed them. The ledger could have been wrong. All reasonable explanations. I folded the clipping and handed it back. Did they search the building? Police did, Marisol said again. Not after this was found. Elaine stirred her coffee. The walls have been opened for plumbing and wiring. Nothing else turned up. Then they're gone. Probably, she said, probably. The hotel opened 6 months later. I passed it one afternoon while taking Sophie to the harbor. The facade had been cleaned. The old museum lettering was gone. Warm lights glowed behind new glass, and people sat in a restaurant where the president's gallery had once been. Near the entrance stood a decorative display. Not wax. A department store mannequin dressed as a bellhop, placed there for the hotel's grand opening promotion. Sophie noticed me looking. Brain being wrong, she asked. She was 11 by then. Maybe a little. The mannequin wore a navy uniform with brass buttons. One white plastic hand rested on a luggage cart. Around its wrist was a silver watch. The strap fit loosely. I stopped walking. The watch was not the same. The face was too large, the band newer, the buckle polished. I knew that. A hotel employee came through the doors, lifted the mannequin by its waist, and carried it inside. As he moved, the watch slipped over the hand and struck the pavement. Plastic, glass, cheap metal. The employee picked it up, laughed, and shoved it into his pocket. Nothing happened. No one followed us. Sophie took my hand, and we continued toward the harbor through the afternoon crowd. Behind us, workers rolled the mannequin out of sight. I did not turn around again. And that's the end of today's chilling tale. If you enjoyed this story and want more nights full of suspense, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Mia Horror Stories, and turn on the bell so you never miss a scare. I've got plenty more stories waiting for you, so stick around and check out the other videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay safe and don't look behind you.